Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live broadcast of the 2017 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. I'm your host, Yasser Serwan. Alongside with me is Grandmaster Robin van Kampen. Robin, welcome to the show.
Hi,
Again,
it's
you
nice
were
to
in
be back.
Rotterdam.
Yeah, I was in
baby.
Rotterdam, and of course the last year I was also here with you,
Yeah, exactly.
doing commentary for one of the weekends. So I'm really happy to be back.
Right.
This is my first day in Wijk aan Zee. I had a lot of fun in Rotterdam. We had a really great day there.
Yeah.
And a lot of exciting games as well. So,
Absolutely. I was watching the show, and I enjoyed you and Anna's commentary very much. Wesley So.
Wesley,
taking the lead.
Absolutely.
Let's set up today's round 7, first with the standings, as we have Wesley So in the lead with +3. Very nice, very professional score. He's doing it very well.
Absolutely.
Magnus Carlsen and our former tournament leader, Pavel Elyanov, at +2. Pavel fell in Rotterdam, actually.
He did.
And Magnus is lurking, as is our 4-time winner, Levon Aronian, at 3.5. Anish Giri finally made a point after drawing, 5 games before? So he's at +1. Wei Yi, thanks to this incredible game of yesterday with Richard Rapport. We were talking about that game before we came on air. Hari Krishna, Dmitry, Sergey, Radek, all at 50%. Adiban at -1, Nepo at -2.
Yeah.
Bit of a surprise, as is Richard's score. And, we can't talk about unlucky Luke. Let's get to the games. We were going to go over a fragment for a moment, but then we decided not to. And we'll start with, because it's just too insane.
Yeah.
It was the game of Richard Rapport.
Perhaps when the openings sort of calm down and the players start to think, we can have a look at that crazy game yesterday between Richard Rapport and Wei Yi.
Yeah.
Possibly, one of the craziest games I've seen in a long time, and it might very well be, the biggest spectacle in some way that we're going to see this tournament. But so many games ahead, and especially today, very exciting game with this pairing.
Magnus Carlsen, Anish Giri. That is great. Wesley So versus Pavel. So our 4 tournament leaders are facing off with one another. Sergey against Levon, another very big game. Yihui Van Welly. Yihui will need to win to keep pace. Nepo, Rapport, Andrejk and Hari Krishna, and Wojciech Adiban. Let us go to the game that will certainly have our interest throughout round 7, and that's the game of Magnus Carlsen, Anish Giri. Speak a little bit about Anish. You've worked with him in the past?
Yes, and Anish is still one of my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
So since I went to university, Anish turned into this so-called drawing machine, right? But then yesterday we had the Trump inauguration, which is you could say historic moment.
No question.
And at the same time, Anish managed to break his drawing streak of I don't know what it was, 20 games, 15 games. So
brutal.
I was thinking about pointing out this correlation earlier on Twitter, but I felt I'll keep it for the show and have some of your thoughts.
Right.
Because who knows, there might be some sort of like I said, correlation or like historic relevance that these two events collided. No, but in all seriousness, so Anish, what I predicted for him for this tournament is that he. I don't expect him to suddenly change gears altogether and start playing very risky chess. But normally, Wijk aan Zee is one of those tournaments early in the year where his style tends to work reasonably well because there's a few lower-rated players and a few, especially players that when they face him with black, will have a difficult time in the openings. And I think yesterday we saw that with Nepomniachtchi actually from the very start of the game, suffering a little bit there. And so Anish's style, sort of suits him well here. And that's why he's on +1 right now. And, as the tournament progresses, of course, he hopes to build on that. But he's really not the type of player who I expect to lose unless it is today. Black against Magnus Carlsen.
Well, he will certainly be tested. For me, Anish is one of those, it's like he's in waiting. Something, you can almost feel that something is building like a volcano. In 2016, he played in the candidates tournament rather successfully, I would say. but he drew all of his games. But 3 of the games he was winning. If he wins those winning positions, bang! I mean, he's there. He's the challenger.
Yeah.
Today, well, not today, but this event, he's had 3 winning positions. He's won 1. If he had just won the positions, kind of in Wesley So style, Wesley gets these opportunities to win, he wins them. He's just on that precipice of being, in my opinion, he's going to have a breakthrough result in an elite tournament very, very shortly. It still might be here, and it might be today. Very famously, here in Vaikanze, Anish actually defeated, with the black pieces, Magnus in a very nice game, and nurtured a +1 result for quite a number of years before Magnus finally in Bilbao snapped.
Exactly, that was last year. That's only about 6 months ago.
Exactly.
And actually, I was playing as well at the time in the C group when Anish had that historic game against Magnus, beating him, and which was really, I remember that everyone was going crazy because it was black. It was in a G3 Grunfeld.
Right.
Really one of those openings where there's a lot of dynamic possibilities, and you'd think that, wow, that's a very risky choice against the world's number 1 already at that time. And he just absolutely crushed Carlsen in that game. So
there was no doubts about it at
I
all.
remember it very well because he won that game, and I was suffering. I think it was against Ivan Nizevic or some player significantly stronger than I was. I was trying to hold the draws wide after a not such a successful opening. And so at some point, the arbiter, I'm walking around, the arbiter comes to me and he says, I think your friend Anish wants to talk to you. So I was like, okay, well...
Really?
Why? Like, does he want to tease me about his position? And then I look at him, and he starts smiling, and I look at his board, and I'm like, what? Did you just win that game?
Right.
Because last time I checked, it was just unclear, right?
Right.
So yeah, that was a very memorable moment for me.
So the speaking was a smile.
The speaking, turned into a big smile, which was explained fairly soon afterwards. But then, ever since the two of them. Well, first of all, Anish really joined the elite chess from there on, not many years after, and never managed to beat Magnus again. I think he had a slight minus score in the rapid and the blitz results among each other. And then, like you said, finally, Magnus actually managed to even out the score last year.
Right.
And so that kind of put an end to this... this dream of maybe he is this one player who can retain a plus score against Magnus.
Right.
And what we're seeing today is actually interesting to me because if we're talking about that last game, there Magnus managed to beat him with a London system, which he's been famously playing a lot in the last year. And today it looks like he's going for is it called a collie or is it a tor?
Zukertort.
Zukertort. How do you call it exactly?
Right. Thinking of it as a Zukertort, this early e3. Well, let's just get to it. So we had d4, knight f6, knight f3. Again, Anish has been moving around in his defenses. At one time, only a Grunfeld, and we were talking just about the g2, g3 game that Magnus famously lost. Now here, this is more or less the London with bishop f4, followed by h3. An opening that Gadakamsky has had in his repertoire for 20, 30 years. And Grishuk has kind of made it very popular, this bishop f4.
I think it was a combined effort where Grishuk started playing it, and then I think it was actually Vladimir Kramnik and Magnus Carlsen, who it turned out later had a training camp together for the World Rapid and Blitz. And they just decided to play a lot of training games with it. And what started out as a Rapid and Blitz sort of repertoire really just last year took over the main stage when it comes to mainline openings. Which to me is still such a peculiar trend. But it has happened, and once the London becomes a main line, anything can become a main line, in my opinion.
Exactly.
So today we're seeing another sideline by Magnus.
So e2, e3. If you were coaching kids, and you would be sitting there and explaining to them that the problem with the move e2, e3 is it blocks the bishop. You want to bring your bishops out before you hem them in. e2, e3 is a way of saying, okay, I just want to to play. I'm not necessarily looking to kill you in the opening. And by the way, Anish doesn't get killed in the opening.
No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't.
His openings and his defenses are extremely good. E7, E6, everything you can do, I can do better. Bishop D3, C5. Now this starts to become a kind of a Kali system. The Zukertort system that I'm more familiar with, let us say, would go B2, B3.
Yeah.
So the idea here is that white is going to leave this diagonal open. He's not going to put his pawn on C3. In other words, after, for example, let me just put a move down, knight C6. Usually you castle. Let me just put a few more moves on the board, and you can see that oftentimes white throws in an A2, A3 whenever he's a little bit worried that the knight might jump to B4. And whenever black menaces the idea of E5, either with rook E8, then the knight hops to E5. And then we understood that the knight comes to D2, well, almost. This knight comes to D2, this pawn goes to F4, and so on. One player who has had very, very good success with this white system, the Zukertort, is Artur Yusupov.
Oh, yeah.
He's won some really, like, almost like, so the games that he wins seem so forcing. It's sort of like, where did black go wrong?
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is terrible.
Well, what I find very funny, if you look at the position that you put up, I remember that a while ago someone wrote a book about this system for white, and I remember the way they sort of marketed this, that, like, let's say black plays a couple of developing moves, because right now it doesn't look so aggressive for white yet.
Right.
But let's imagine that we start developing, and then I'm going to pick a few standard, perhaps not very good moves.
Right.
But let's say it was some sort of position of this type with the rook already, kind of rook F3 being the last move, and you know that it's going to swing over the H3, some threats are going to start. And I think the title in the book or the picture on the book was this position, more or less, and it said, would you rather have black or white here? And then like something like, have fun with the collie or play the collie or something like that. And I thought that was very clever, and it was a funny way of making your opening look very good. But indeed, if both players just develop their pieces, so to speak,
in a standard way,
then this is the type of position you might get, and this is what white players, of course, hope to sort of aim for.
Exactly.
But to be very honest, Yasser, playing on the black side, my first thought would be, okay, I don't want to get into this position, but I would not know exactly how to play as black. So. But then again, Magnus, he didn't decide to go for B3.
He went the C2, C3 way. Now, this is really strange for me because it really does beg the question, what is it that white intends to do with this bishop? Now, other than, transposing into a kind of Murano defense with an extra tempo, you take and play b4 and fianchetto the bishop, or you take and you play e4 and the bishop comes out the other way. In either case, I think to myself, well, once you've accomplished all of that, you've got equality.
Yeah, exactly.
Well done.
I mean, like you say, you could go, let's say, knight d2, d takes c5, bishop takes c5, e4, but then, for example, if a lot of pieces get exchanged or whatnot, is that really your strategy here as white?
Right.
Is that what makes you happy? So, a peculiar choice by Magnus, to say the least.
And of course, he did it also against Sergei in the World Championship match. There, I think he even threw a bishop b5 check in at some point. Sergei actually equalized fairly comfortably.
Yeah, he did.
b6. Let me just update the position. So after b6, short castles. Clearly, it's in black's interest to trade the light squared bishop. The only problem, of course, is you don't do it immediately after castles. Bishop a6 would be an oversight, thanks to the double attack queen a4 check. Oops. So the desirable bishop a6 needs to be delayed. Did he play bishop b7?
He played bishop b7, it looks like, and
Which
that's
is intriguing. I would have played bishop d6.
yes, or bishop e7, and then castle, and then
Then,
think.
and then provoke queen e2 is what I mean.
Exactly,
to say. Yeah.
because if you're like, clearly e4 is no longer a plan. Our plan
Right.
of d takes e5 and b4 is no longer there.
Right.
So what we're heading towards is a stonewall position.
Right.
If I were to play as white, something like
Yeah.
knight e5 f4
Exactly.
is pretty much the only plan I have in mind. Of course, you could go b3, bishop b2, and really play as though it's a Slav, but that just looks very unambitious on white's part.
Exactly.
So I'm expecting a very early knight e5 here by Magnus.
By Magnus. So indeed, let's give it a shot. Bishop b. Okay, so as we've been explaining, takes on c5 is hardly desirable. First of all, bishop takes c5 is not bad, keeping the pawn structure, but then if you're not ready for knight bd2 and e4, then capturing is not ill-advised. So I don't think Magnus played knight e5 by
No,
the way.
it looks like he has played knight b to d2.
Right, knight b to d2.
Which, it could still imply he's thinking about knight e5, but if, for example, black decides to go, let's say, knight d7, then you do have to think about knight takes e5 as well, although maybe that's not a big problem for white.
Something like this.
And f4.
Yeah. Dutch Stonewall.
Dutch Stonewall, yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. But again, outside of knight e5, there's nothing that I'm very proud of in terms of white's position. I would probably, if I were in black shoes, I like the little bit more aggressive knight c6. Not that that doesn't stop you from playing knight e5, should you wish. And we would get, let's say, a position like this. By coincidence, I was the women's team captain in Baku for the long story, but I got tricked horribly, Robin.
Okay.
You can't imagine. It was really sad. And Irina Krush in a game had a position like this, and her approach was, I found, very intriguing. She simply dropped her knight back, dropped her knight here, and played f5 against these attacks.
Yeah.
And she won a very nice game. I mean, I thought it was an interesting way of neutralizing these attacks. And, well, it made a very healthy
Very good impression.
Yeah, like she really knew what she was doing.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of there was this game, this tournament between Adibon and Levon Aronian. It was derived from a London system, and there also kind of similarly, of course the bishop was not on c1, it was I think on e5 or whatnot, but at some point white indeed went for queen h5 or something of that nature, and Levon was ready to tackle it with f5 and just had a very easy, game to neutralize Adibon's attack.
Right.
What I thought is maybe interesting, because your suggestion of delaying bishop to b7, I think there's actually a very nice point to that, and maybe it's worth showing. So bishop to d6, I think you mentioned, to be precise.
Okay, just a second. Bishop to d6, yeah.
Yeah, so imagine I play my f4, or like knight e5, f4. Let's do it this way. And now, just to show the viewers, I'm guessing that one of your ideas could be to go bishop a6 in one go, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's maybe why bishop to b7 was a little bit committal by Anish, and he could have put a little bit more thought into that, or maybe he is familiar with the position, but this is kind of like the ideal, I would almost say, for black to do this in one go, right?
Precisely, because when I look in the position, there's two pieces of whites that I really admire. The bishop on d3 and the knight on e5. Trading your opponent's best pieces is a really good strategy, good strategical chess. Let's take a look at some of the other games.
Yeah.
I'm told that in the game between Dmitry, that really exciting
That's the
things.
last one on the list. Yeah.
This one. Exciting. What?
What has happened?
This is not exciting. Wait a minute. I think Leonard is having too much fun with us. Speaking of a London system, in this Queen's Gambit declined early trade, oftentimes we see this bishop f4, bishop d6. knight e7. It's very
But
a key point.
But hold on, Yasser. I think the real point to why this game was so exciting is not this opening itself. It's more about how they got there. Because if we have a look at how the players got into a very normal how do we call this structure again?
The Queen's Gambit, the Carlsbad.
The Carlsbad structure,
yes.
Exactly. Dimitri actually started with c2, c3.
No way.
Yes.
c2, c3. Okay, this is an indication that he wants to play the London, but he's doing it in a delayed fashion.
Yeah, he's joking around a little bit with this move.
c2, c3. Okay. Well, not an everyday appearance.
And I must say, I find
quickly.
I find that Harry he puts very little thought into, okay, am I going to do something? Because, for example, a move like f5 or knight f6 and g6, or there's so many things that would go through my mind, like, geez, having committed to c3, I don't really know what to do. Because if you decide to go, for example, for d4, which is a logical move, it looks particularly silly. For example, against the Dutch. I mean, you might be playing something with g3, bishop g2, and queen b3. There are systems where it fits, but it surely is a little bit committal to go c3 against the Dutch.
Exactly.
So there's so many things you could go for, but Harry actually played very quickly and really didn't want to spend time thinking about all his options.
Would you like a coffee?
I have one over
there. By the way, that's a very funny story. At one time in his career, Tony Miles had the universal answer to every opening.
Okay.
b7, b6, right? You play d4, he plays b6. You play e4, he plays b6. Knight f3, b6. So I opened up 1 g3 against him. And he leaned across the board and he said to me, I love these moral victories. He played e5, I went c4, and then we learned English. But the point is Tony Miles, if he sees the move c2, c3, he's smacking down b7, b6
Absolutely.
with glee. Yeah. And he says, I haven't equalized, I'm better.
Yeah.
Like, what, c3?
Actually, probably a very good move, b6 as well. I mean, so many options, right?
Exactly.
But then Harry, to be fair, if I think about this line over here, this is something that a lot of white players still consider to be something in which they truly fight for an advantage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks to the minority attack. Yes.
And so the fact that Harry goes for this, I mean, to be fair, I think it is a slight improvement over a normal Carlsbad structure because the knight is not on f6. As he played in the game, knight goes to e7, which of course is great for exchanging the bishop in the future on f5 in some cases.
Right.
But I find it okay. He decided to just take a very solid approach and
not punish
it, so to speak. Yes.
Okay, e2, e3, knight came to f5, bishop takes d6, knight takes d6. As you were mentioning, the knight on e7 supports a bishop trade with a future bishop f5. So, frankly, after bishop f5, with castles or without castles, I'm already thinking black should be equalized. Equal. No problem.
What I always find fascinating is in this structure, it's not something I play regularly with either black or white, but this knight on d6 is of course famous. That's virtually the best square on the board for one of the black knights, right?
Exactly.
I think it was Petrosian who showed that you can actually start up an attack with the 3 pawns on the king side, even if both sides castle king side.
Right.
And then it was later Kasparov who copied that idea and played a very nice game. I'm just referencing to one of my favorite chapters from my great predecessors, right?
Yes.
So, and I actually managed to use this once in a game against Keith Arkle. Also copied that idea.
Yes.
And so seeing the knight so early on d6, I'm very happy. I would be very happy as Harry here because this was truly actually he's achieved a very nice version of these types of lines.
Absolutely.
And once the bishop is exchanged on f5, if that happens, then the knight can return to d6, and one of the problems, of course, is that the minority attack becomes very difficult with a knight on d6.
Actually impossible. The knight on d6 is really annoying. When white plays for the minority attack, which we're talking about, b4, b5, this knight can sometimes use the square c4 thanks to b7, b5, and knight c4. Almost certainly from this position, if white is aspiring to an advantage, he's going to have to go f3 and e4 as Kasparov played. Let's take a look at some other games. I want to go to Wesley So, actually. He is our tournament leader, after all. Pavel started brilliantly with 3.5 out of 4 points. What a way to start Vaikansei, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in the A group.
Absolutely. No, it's very impressive.
You're very, very, very pleased when this happens. It was, again, it's become the rigor. Everybody and his brother is playing the slow Yoko piano. Again, one of my favorite books, I think it's in every chess player's library, My 60 Memorable Games. Bobby Fischer liked the Evans Gambit.
Yeah.
B2, B4. Won some nice games.
Oh, for sure.
And even Garry Kasparov played it against Jeroen Piquet, I believe, the Evans Gambit. And won a brilliant suit,
yes.
actually. But nobody's doing that. In fact, there was a game of Fabiano Caruana where he was on the black side in Dortmund against the German Grandmaster Nessipiano. Yes. And it almost is so very sad for Gambitier players. I mean, it looked like just a refutation.
Yes, nowadays I think it is actually Black who's claiming almost an advantage in the Evans Gambit.
Exactly.
Because they have some ways of holding on to a pawn. So
exactly.
It's no longer the most popular.
I do apologize. I should put the Evans Gambit up on our screen.
Yeah, I believe Bishop A5 is the trend now. And one of the key ideas, actually, it's funny. It's so white, I believe, plays D2, D4 or plays castles first. I think castles first. Right? D6, and D2, D4.
Right.
And
I think E7 or something.
Yeah, something like that. Queen E7. Yeah. But I believe even if you do play the move D2, D4 before going for castles, I believe then also Black has the option of playing, I think it is D6, and there's something funny here, like Queen to B3, Queen to D7, some games I've seen, and now Black's main idea is Bishop to B6 here, with the idea of Knight to A5.
Exactly.
And this is actually supposedly already a fairly pleasant position for Black. Of course, I'm fairly sure that this is a computer invention. This is not very natural play at all. But this is one of the lines where players said, geez, we don't know what to do with white. So,
exactly. Yeah. Well, B2, B4 will have to wait, I'm afraid. And we get castles instead.
Yeah, so this is also interesting, Yasser. So theory has developed so much here that after the move D2, D3, some Black players, they decide to castle here.
Exactly.
And what that means is that after the normal move c3, that gives them the option of d5, which some great players like Lev, like Vladimir Kramnik, they're actually playing this way. So the reason that white no longer plays c3 earlier, decides to castle first, is that supposedly after the move rook to e1, there are some differences if you go d5, where white delays the move c3, and I think he takes and played knight e2. So there's already subtleties nowadays very early on here, and that also explains that now that Pavel has shown that he will play d6, now Wesley plays c3 because he's no longer worried about d5 ideas.
Very good. And also, I do believe that there was an interesting idea, Alexander Grishuk. You're explaining that the reason that c2, c3, once you commit, you allow this d7, d5. It was Alexander Grishuk who played a2, a4, saying, okay, now d5, I'll take and play rook e1, and you're not so happy. But reserving and waiting for an opportunity to play c3, and you move a4 becomes useful. Oftentimes, this knight, strangely enough, actually gets rerouted. Not necessarily to the g3 square, but to the e3 square. And we've seen Fabiano Caruana, Vishy Anand, amongst many other elite grandmasters playing in such a style.
Many grandmasters who traditionally are fantastic Rui Lopez players, they are really dabbling now with the Italian, also because there's so many similarities when it comes to the structure, right? Really, what the Italian has turned into is almost the Spanish with the bishop on c4, especially if you think nowadays players are playing against the Berlin, they're doing d3 and so on. The differences have become smaller between the Rui Lopez and the Italian game.
And then we saw also in this tournament that no less than Magnus Carlsen played the bishop opening against Wei Yi to avoid the Petrov, the Russian.
Yes, something I'm also guilty of trying once in a while.
The bishop opening.
The bishop opening, yes.
Okay, let's continue and get to the position that the players have reached. A4, bishop a7, knight a3, h6, knight c. I'm assuming that all of this is orthodox, pretty standard stuff.
Yes.
And that the players after bishop e3 have reached their preparation.
Yeah. So this plan with knight a3, knight c2, this is kind of what revamped the Italian somewhat, because traditionally, of course, like you pointed out earlier, knight d2, knight f1, knight g3, that's sort of the way to go. But this knight a3 maneuver has made things a little interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Before we go to the next game, I just want to shout out, there's a quick tweet, because it's Kids Week here. Did you see that? It's very nice. They're having not only simuls and things like that, but they're actually having a presentation, a live commentary for the children.
Really? I've not seen that. No, that's great.
It's very, very, very sweet. So here's the tweet there. Oops, I didn't read it, but I guess everybody else did. All right, now let's go on to... So at this moment, do you like white? Do you like white? Do you think this is an advantage of any sort?
So one last fun fact about this, because this is just one of the things that it really has turned into something I play regularly as white.
Yeah.
Out of so many great players that have played this, it is actually, and not many people know this, it's Pavel Elyanov himself who is expected to be the creator of this whole knight a3, knight c2.
Really?
And the way that happened is he was the second of Maria Muzichuk in her match against Hu Yifan.
Yes.
I think it was last year or 2
years.
Yes. Yeah. And so he was her main second. She played it in that match. And a little bit before that, I believe it was Pavel who played one game with it. Just one game, and it didn't really go unnoticed.
Right.
And then after that match, Hu Yifan had some trouble fighting it, basically, and it took off. Everyone started playing it, and Anish actually even beat Pavel on the white side of this later in Norway chess. So just creating a line doesn't give you the rights to win all the games, obviously. But it is really Pavel who was at the forefront and has started this trend. So it will be very interesting to see if he comes up with maybe a new plan or something. But that's worth thinking about as well.
Well, it's worth knowing, because we need to find out who's guilty in
Yes.
terms of developing all of these Joko Pietas.
Yes.
And we'll hang them in the city square.
Yeah.
All right. Bishop e3, and sorry, you didn't answer. Do you like white? Do you?
I generally prefer white a little bit here, yes. Especially if I can provoke bishop takes e3, knight takes e3.
Then that trade would improve your position. Let me be the devil's advocate for a second. Bishop e6.
I believe this has been played.
Oh, has it?
Yeah. So
okay, good.
Bishop takes e6 is the standard reply.
Okay.
It also has been played. I'm expecting queen takes e6. It's a more solid approach.
Keeping the structure.
And now really what white hopes is that after bishop takes a7, rook takes a7, and I think something like rook e1, I'm going to go d2, d3, d4. And the fact that you're gonna spend at least one tempo getting the rook back to a8, it might give white some slight hopes of getting an advantage. But to be very fair, these
Black
positions
solid.
are rocky solid for
rock solid. Yeah, there you go for black. Yeah, well, as we saw in the World Championship match, again, Magnus was having a real hard time proving any edges against. I like that. I picked it up by reading an article. I didn't realize that Sergei had a nickname, Minister of Defense.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
isn't
a
that
great one.
great?
That's a very fitting one.
So the Minister of Defense was holding his positions quite well
Okay.
in
Yeah, for
that
sure.
match. All right, let's continue around. We haven't seen. Shall we just check in on Luke Van Welly? Hey, Luke is back to
Luke is
his
back.
favorite Najdorf. How did he do it? Well, no more perk defenses.
Yes, no more perks. I actually criticized Luke for playing perks and King's Indian. I mean, King's Indian, I like it, but he didn't play it the way that I like to play it, with C6 and A6 and
Right.
so on. So I was saying that, I know Luke, this was really how he was playing, I think in the 90s, and he was very successful. But times change, and those openings, they are simply not considered very good.
Right.
So if you're going to play them, you either need a very precise idea of why you're going for this, and maybe something specific to your opponent.
Right.
But I wasn't seeing that. So
No.
I like that Luki is now taking on the Sicilian again,
Right.
and playing something with a little bit of a better image.
And indeed,
so
the
to speak.
Najdorf, if you do manage to drag an elite player away from the Joko Piano Spanish torturers, the Najdorf has been, the most dynamic counter defense amongst the top players, and I include, of course, no less than MBL, and Anish has taken it up as well. So we do have Bishop G5,
Very exciting.
Knight B8 D7. It was Bishop G5 in the London Classic, just played a month ago, that really was rocking the ramparts.
Yes,
Wow,
yes.
some great games.
Yeah.
Fabiano Nakamura, the Queen Sacrifice, and others. Yes.
Oh, definitely. Some
And-
great. And then Nakamura
Oh,
using
yeah,
it to
it-
beat MBL, right?
That was great.
Yeah, it was really
like,
interesting.
okay.
So one thing I can say, being a
About
Najdorf
Knight.
player as well, is when you don't have as much time to prepare for all
Yeah.
of your games, which sometimes I don't anymore, you're very happy that you don't have to play the Najdorf at all times, because if there's one thing I don't want to play, it is the Najdorf when Bishop G5 becomes fashionable again.
Again.
Because that line just gives you such a headache with black. It's just so dangerous, and
You wake up with cold sweats in the middle of the night.
I can honestly attest to that happening a few times when I was planning on the Najdorf. You lay in bed and you think, okay, Bishop E2, okay, H3, I sort of have it covered
G3,
nowadays.
it's okay.
Oh, and then you're like,
Bishop G5.
what am I doing against Bishop G5 tomorrow if it happens? You know,
Right.
like-
Yeah, you refresh. For me, when I was playing the white side of an open Sicilian, the problem for me with the Bishop G5 move was of course the poison pawn. But another real problem is that when you play the move, when you play the move after E6, the main line I mean, when you play the move F4, it's not popular.
No,
It's not popular.
it's not popular anymore.
The Polygaevsky
The Polygaevsky,
variation.
yeah.
But I tell you what, if you go, if Luke Van Velli had spent the whole night preparing the Polygaevsky variation, and he played B5, he would have gone into a shock.
Yeah,
because you don't. I mean, it's
Yeah.
ultra sharp for the white player, and now
Yeah.
the cold sweats are on the other shoe. Not to say that I think the Polygaevsky is the greatest opening or defense, whatever, but there's so many sharp.
It's
traps,
a headache because you
mines.
need to remember a lot of lines, and Polygaevsky is indeed one of the most forcing examples. But then there is this Knight D7 move. You have all the traditional lines after E6. You now have to differentiate between the normal poison pawn and the poison pawn, including H6 first.
Right.
I mean, of course it works both ways. As black, you're horribly frightened of the Bishop G5 line, but then with white, you're like, geez,
Equally,
like I have this one idea in this line, but what about these other 5 lines? You know, did I have time to remember those or like refresh those? So.
Now the weird part about Knight B8 D7 is I want to give Boris Gelfand credit for kind of reviving this line a bit. In the old days, E7, E6, again, that was just so standard. Even in this modern circus, if I'm not mistaken, even some players that played the strange move G7, G6.
Yeah, both in the classical Sicilian, in the Rouser they tried it, and also in the Nighter, if I believe. Yeah.
So G6. So there's just so many variations that keeping the elite players on their toes. Knight B8, D7. Now, in the old days, this move actually came with a question mark.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
I think I was still even like I was already actively playing this line when it came up, and people were wondering like, wasn't this a question mark, exclamation mark / question mark deserving move, so to speak? Yeah.
And the reason was bishop c4.
Yes.
And so this, if there is a drawback to knight b8, d7, this is definitely the very big challenge, because White's development is free-flowing. These knights are a little bit awkward at the moment, and how are you going to develop the bishop? e7, e6, these sacrifices, especially when White is castled, are almost over. I mean, in practical terms, it's very, very hard.
Yeah, actually, it was briefly e7, e6 here that was sort of trendy when knight d7 started out again. And although there's many options for White, in my opinion personally, it's the setup with queen e2 followed by a long castle, and then very often there's sacrifice on e6.
Bam.
That really puts Black in a very difficult situation. So queen to b6, what it's basically trying to do, which is played in the game, and it really is always played at this point, it's trying to provoke bishop to b3, and only then playing e6. So the queen kind of steps out of that sacrifice on e6, at least after, let's say, a possible bishop takes e6, f takes e6, knight takes e6. It's no longer hanging with a tempo, right?
Exactly.
So Black has a lot more time to think about defensive resources over here.
Exactly. And it does make a strange impression when you get you draw back the bishop to b3, only to the stutter step, right? So queen b6, basically.
Yep.
Fine, castles. Okay, I'm not going to waste the tempo with bishop b3, and it's a challenge. You don't really want to take on b2 with lagging so
I personally
hard.
had a game where I took on b2.
Oh, you're my hero. I mean, grabbing those pawns.
If I'm correct, it went something like queen d2 over here. Sorry.
Yes.
Queen d2 was, I believe it was played. I went e6. The move rook b1, queen to a3, and now my opponent casually dropped bishop to d5 on me, and I sat there not knowing exactly what was going on.
Okay, I wouldn't have guessed that one either.
No, this is actually, I wouldn't say mainline stuff, but this is theoretical, an old theoretical debate by now, which is supposedly also sort of okay for Black. What Luke played is the second option, queen to c5, but queen takes b2 is a very valid option.
And bishop d5, not sacrificing the bishop. I mean, I see this in a lot of Tal's games. You're just going to, White is going to use this f5 square in the open e file. So,
I guess e takes d5 is really what they're thinking of here, and of course, like you pointed out, bishop to e7, knight f5.
Is the issue.
Yeah.
Great stuff. All right, let's get into the game. Castles was played, queen c5. You're saying this is the big theoretical...
Yeah, I think this is also one of the lines that is Black has decided is one of the best answers to short castle. Almost forcing bishop d5, because you don't want to play bishop takes f6 voluntarily.
And kind of help Black resolve the two-knight tango thing. Bishop d5... e6.
Mm-hmm.
Well, move your bishop? No, thank you. He said e-way, rook e1, and I'm assuming the piece sacrifice after e takes d5, e takes d5, check.
Yeah, king to d8 is sort of your standard reply there, but it's probably very, very dangerous, to say the least.
Okay, so bishop e7 was Luke's. Help me out here, because I'm a fish out of water. Bishop takes e6, queen takes g5. That ends that option, I'm assuming.
Yes, so that's actually a very good point. White would love to play bishop takes e6 and knight takes e6, but of course the bishop on g5 will be hanging here. Everything works out because he would be able to take on g7 and get the knight to f5. If I'm moving my queen, that's not what I want
as black.
So Wei Yi played bishop to e3, getting the bishop out of this pin, so to speak.
Right.
That's preparing all sorts of annoying moves with the knight. Luke replied with queen to a5, making another queen move. You tell the kids don't make so many queen moves in the opening.
Right.
Then once you get to a certain level, you learn that you can basically break the rules in all sorts of ways. So This is a good example of it.
Right. But still, that famous comment from Victor Korchnoi, he was working with John Vandervelde. So John Vandervelde would, in their analysis sessions, had said something like queen c5 to a5, right?
Yeah.
Moving the queen for the third or fourth time
Yeah.
in the game. And Victor said, John, before you break the rules of strategy, you should first know them. This is an electrocution by Victor Korchnoi.
Victor was a legend.
Oh, he was great.
Yeah.
But no, this move, queen a5, makes good sense because you don't want to drop back to the c7 square because the invitation to now sacrificing on e6 is simply brilliant for white.
Exactly.
So the queen stays away from the a6 square. Queen a5 was played.
Mm-hmm.
And now how does it go?
Yeah, bishop takes e6 was played already.
Right.
And unfortunately, Yasser, I cannot say that anything creative is happening. Games have been played like this.
Of course, I would expect that to be the case. Yes.
Of course, black has to take back, has to accept the
course.
sacrifice. And I believe
knight e5, right?
Knight e5 is the move that to me looks very logical at first sight, but I believe it's actually king f7 that is the computer's proposition. But I must say I'm really operating on very, very old analysis that I don't really remember very well. But I believe that it's king f7.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
so
on
the board.
If I remember it correctly, king f7, knight to g5 check looks almost forced.
Okay.
And there is a very subtle difference here between different king moves. And for some reason, my memory tells me f8, the illogical f8 might be the right square.
Wow.
But with all this being said, and me definitely not being able to recall these lines, why don't we have a look at quickly at the most logical move, which is knight to e5.
Yes.
Is it something like b4 that is really bothering black here, or is it simply a matter of not wanting to give up this extra pawn?
I don't know. You got to go. If you're going to go into a line like this, I can only give you one advice: go in very, very well prepared.
Yes. Yeah.
Because this is super sharp. If we play knight g7, king f7, knight f5, have we managed to scarf down 3 pawns?
Yes, we scarfed down 3 pawns, but I'm not particularly excited about white's prospects. Because it looks to me like, let's say I take this knight off, and I start developing something of my own over here.
And you get a counterattack yourself.
Yeah, maybe the other rook could go to e8. I feel like black is up in development here. I don't see immediate danger around my king anymore.
Right.
And although I wouldn't say that white is lost or anything, I don't think this is something black has to worry about.
Thank goodness for that.
Yeah.
All
Some
right.
logic still holds in this modern age.
We're going to let those players do in their theoretical debate, and it is a deep one, and we'll take a look at...
One last thing, Yasser, which is the clock times, which unfortunately tells a story that is all too familiar to us in Luke's games, where I think Luke is actually this time very much trying to recall his analysis or his old preparation, but Wei Yi, being really expert in the knight or from both sides, of course,
has blitzed out his moves.
Maybe definitely didn't prepare this line, but I can tell you he probably knows all the details by heart.
Right.
So Luki here in a difficult spot, and I'm fairly sure his train of thought is similar to mine, thinking there is something wrong with knight e5, maybe it's b4, maybe calculating it now, but then also thinking maybe I recall king f7 and that was the move. So Luke here under some pressure, but surely so far he's found his way. I know that this is still the correct line for black.
Very good. Very good. All right, and we have, let's see, another very crucial game to our standings, and that is between Sergey and Levon. Sergey opened e4, and more than any other player on circuit, I must say e5. Levon has been true to the classical defense his whole career. Made a great living on the Marshall Gambit as black, scared the bejesus out of everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
Nobody's going down those routines, and once again we have the Joko piano. Okay, d3, h3, and here we have the immediate d5
Right.
without c3, but h3 has been included. Okay.
Yeah, so the one thing must be said, Levon always tries to go for d5 setups here. So basically players are thinking almost about what is the most favorable setup here as white, like which moves prepare best for d5, because kind of like in his Marshall style, he likes to play against the Italian in the most active of ways, and then definitely d5 is your weapon. So
exactly.
Karyakin Trilly was prepared here, and what we see is actually sort of what I was referring to, that some players think that delaying c3 is really something worth doing, but the subtleties are definitely there, because now after the logical bishop to e6, he plays c3.
Challenging white.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want to take the pawn,
Exactly.
be my guest. And he didn't take the pawn.
He didn't take the pawn, that's right.
And how comes?
It feels like something is happening around that f2 square, but what is it exactly?
And exactly, let's see. First of all, we'll lure the rook to e5 before we'll take a look at the f2 square, because this is just better for black.
Exactly.
I mean, good grief. Well, that answered that one.
Yes.
So we saw c2, c3, etc. Now, I'm not a big... one of the impressions that I've been given, that if you're not going to win the e5 pawn, I think it was a game of Peter Svidler that made a very powerful impression. He played white, and what
Against
he did...
Ernesto in Arkev, I believe.
Yeah, what he did as white is he quickly brought his knight to e4, went like knight g5 or bishop g5, and
but I think it was Peter who also delayed his short castle, and maybe he got to play something like he had g4 ideas there as well, stopping f5.
So he got some kind of accelerated version, if you will. All right. Well, rook e1 was the Minister of Defense's choice. Rook e1, bishop e6, c3, bishop b6, bishop e3. Finally, black said, well, I do like my pawn.
Yes, at some point I'm going to have to defend it.
But did he do it in the right moment? Because after d4...
Well, I can tell you one thing, Yasser. Yes. He definitely didn't do it in the traditional way. Because this normally, again, when you learn people new to chess, like how does all this central tension and whatnot work, this would be kind of a classic example of, hey, something's going a little wrong here for black, who now is going to get his e-pawn isolated, to say the least.
Right.
But chess is getting so...
concrete, no?
So concrete.
You need move after move after move to force to prove it wrong. Now, in this case with d4, by the way, white's threat is not necessarily to capture this pawn on e5. Rather, white's threat is c4, followed by d5, winning a piece. Hence,
yes, bishop to f7 was played, but before we go to this position, I think it's really worth checking out the somewhat weird-looking c4 over here.
Wow.
Because it seems like this could, at first sight, this looks like a winning tactic.
It does. The whole point is if I play the move knight d5, b4.
Or knight e7, but let's put on b4 because it attacks the d3.
D, c4, c5 with a double attack. The bishop on e6 is hanging with a check, as is the bishop on b6.
Right.
So yes.
You would like to exchange this with a tempo, but then it's check, and this is simply a piece down, it seems.
So let's continue the line just for a second. King h8, You took a piece. Yes, you did. You took a piece.
I took a full piece. It's not coming back anytime soon, it seems.
No me gusta. Sorry. Let's look at c4 again.
Why did the players ignore this possibility?
Is this a case of mutual blindness? Because look at this.
This looks like a
mutual blindness.
I'm fairly sure that this is simply a blunder by Aronian.
Yeah, because you mentioned knight d5 e7, but that doesn't change the reality that c4 c5. Good grief. And f6 came, according to our clocks, after a near 13-minute think. d4 was 6 minutes for Sergei to find the move d4, maybe missing the very obvious c4.
It seems like Aronian actually put some time into the move f6 over here, so this was not necessarily his preparation. I must say, Yasser, we said you got to defend that pawn at some point, but
maybe not this point.
Not really, though, because if you think
moment.
About the tactic with knight takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes f2, it's still there. So f6 really wasn't required. You could have thought about maybe something like rook e8, maybe so that a move like c4 doesn't work anymore, as the bishop on e6 will be protected.
Right, let me just show you
that. It's truly a very strange way to start off the day at this game.
Right, rook e8, knight d2, f6. Kind of in this way, you've reinforced the bishop. Wow, so let's do that again, because this is really this is a shocker for me. Again, I'll play the most aggressive, c5. Here, you almost want to reach for the bishop on b6 and play bishop takes f2.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
some sort of desperado,
desperado shot, right? Hamana. This is...
I can't make much out of this, Yasser. This really begs the question, like, how is it possible that something like this happens on, almost 2800 level? And does it remind, have you seen something like this before?
Yeah, unfortunately it's happened, and it's happened all the time. It's a case of the double blindness.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I trust you, you trust me, I'm hanging a rook, but you see that there's some pattern that you're vaguely familiar with. You say, I know.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was planning to play b4 anyway.
Yeah.
So, you hang on to your rook. Here, this looks like a case of a double blindness but it's getting more scarce because the players are so much sharper these days. They're seeing so many tactics. And on Sergei's side of the fence, I can say when he played the move c2, c3, he stopped.
Yeah,
he's not playing c4, not moving again, right? Having said that, this is a pattern that I've seen numerous times.
Yeah, it's not new or anything.
Right.
It really isn't.
C4 is just blunderful. So a mutual big miss.
I wouldn't say it's common. It's not like a everyday tactic.
No.
It is something that you would find in a tactics book, or
of course.
Something that can somehow appear in a position.
Right.
And this turns out to be exactly that position.
Wow. Bishop f7. Let me just update the players, because I do believe after the move bishop f7, we have an update. D takes, we have several moves. Bishop f7, d takes e5, knight takes c5, bishop takes d5. Well, this is a shock.
Well, the thing is, Yasser, I almost feel like because Aronian kind of cheated Sergei by playing f6 without rook e8, I have the feeling that he might have got himself in a very good position now, because suddenly, it turns out if we go knight takes e5, the standard move, really that would only be a serious weakness had the rook not been on f8, because I don't really care about that e-pawn. I mostly care about my f-pawn being really exposed once that trade takes place. So I think
you're just saying that the rook on f8 is sitting here in a nice ambush.
I really like black's position here, because it feels to me like white is just underdeveloped, and also has to take into account moves such as, let's say, knight d2. Of course, bishop takes h5 is there, but otherwise there's ideas like knight f4, knight d3. Too many horrible things going on if you just decide to develop here. So Sergey playing bishop takes d5 is certainly not a normal move, but I feel that because of the strange thing that happened in his position, White has to suddenly adjust his normal scheme of play, because I think this is no longer a good opening position for him.
Yeah, well, I still recall, I think it was Game 4 of the World Championship match, where Sergey made an incredible decision. Normally speaking, in the Spanish, this is what we would call the Spanish torture bishop.
Mm-hmm.
Like the light squared bishop in the Spanish is a crucial instrument in putting pressure on Black's position. In that game, in Game 4, Sergey traded it for a blockading knight. And that was what?
Like, why did you do that?
Yeah, like a strategically horrible situation. Here, because Black, like you were saying, enjoys a much better and freer development, he's done this bishop takes d5. At least in this case, I would say for a very purposeful reason.
Yes, a concrete reason.
He's going to deny Black the two bishops,
mm-hmm.
but like you were saying, Black's development and the freer game, I'm thinking, let's just say a move like a c6 for now,
mm-hmm.
just to protect this bishop, and now everybody's favorite queen h4, and it's White who's being thrown on the defensive.
Yeah, not only that, I think at least for Black, it's also worth looking at some tactics. One that I'm spotting over here is, for example, bishop takes. I'm expecting rook takes. And you need to consider moves like bishop takes a2 here. They might not be very good, or they might be drawish, but let's say Black could already bail out almost here. I don't think he's risking much in any sort of endgame where he recaptures the material. And for example, first sight, there's only one side playing for something
advantage, right? And that's Black. Yes, I agree.
This looks, by the way, like a very forcing approach. It's maybe not something Aronian fancies, because he feels like there's more in it for him, but he already has very pleasant choices.
Bailout, yeah, absolutely. All right, let's just see. The final game, I think we haven't taken a look at.
I think we're quickly going to have a look at what happened in Magnus's game, just to see
sure.
how that developed.
Of course.
And then we'll move on to some of the games we haven't seen.
There's our Stonewall, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what? B2, B3.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm a big fan of White's approach to this.
I've said it before, Yasser, about Magnus's approach with a lot of these sidelines. I feel like he really did a great job with the London system, but for example, when he opened up with the Trompovsky in his World Championship match, I understand it was really funny, the reference to Trump and whatnot, but looking at just the opening itself, it really didn't impress me much.
No.
And I kind of feel that recently he's getting it wrong a lot more than right.
And
it's sometimes really sort of messing up his chances as White, because even though he's Magnus Carlsen, the opening is a very important part of the game, and you're not going to be able to outplay just about anyone from, let's say, an almost
dead equal
or slightly worse almost position, right? And I'm not saying that is the case here, but this setup doesn't impress me.
Me either. And having said that, a little bit surprised about the move bishop d6. I've always taught that in such positions you occupy the center. You play knight e4 and you challenge White. Doubtlessly White is going to play a c2, c3, c4 at some moment, and then it's kind of nice to get the knight out of the way, and sometimes the bishop pops over to the f6 diagonal, and you kind of go, your bishop on b2 sucks, dude. Now you're in a pin, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
But that was not what has happened.
I must say your move appeals to me. It seems more naturally than bishop d6 moving the same piece again in the opening.
Right. I can kind of understand that Anish is making a square.
Yeah.
Okay.
He wants to play e6, e5 maybe, but that seems like it was not the most natural option. Knight to e4, although it's also moving the same piece twice, like you said, it occupies the center immediately. So
and you're kind of freeing up, in one way, you're freeing up the knight to go to f6, the other knight d7 to f6, and you're freeing up the f6 square. Well, maybe it's taking too many liberties. But
Yes. Our good old f7, f5.
Instead, Dutch
Yeah.
stonewall. Didn't happen. Bishop d6 was Anisha's choice. c4.
Okay.
It's funny. If the queen were on e7, they would be a totally symmetrical position.
Yes. Queen e7 was not played immediately, though. This is
took
always
first.
interesting because here you get to decide who's going to play hanging pawns, right?
Right.
And it seems like Anish was happy
The first
to
one to give the opponent.
give the opponent the hanging pawn. So Magnus,
Okay.
of course, went for that.
93. Now, one strategic rule of thumb, not always the case, every position's different, blah, blah, blah. But when you are playing against the hanging pawns, we're assuming that somewhere down the road there's going to be a D takes, B takes, and then you get your so-called hanging pawns. The rule of thumb is the player who is opposing the hanging pawns trade off some pieces.
Yep.
The hanging pawns give the white player in this case a little bit more free hand. You don't want to get into a cramped position, and hence we understand the move bishop a3, takes, but f4.
Right.
Ooh.
There's a lot of action with the f pawns, or at least in our minds there is.
Yeah, f4. Well, that's really throwing down the gauntlet. That's we would kind of describe that as a bridge burning move. You don't get to take the move f4, f5, f4 back.
No.
You know, and okay. Oh boy.
One of the first things that comes to mind, talking
Yes.
about exchanging pieces, it's just a very concrete move once
Yes.
again. It's like I was for a second I was worried for Magnus
About
this one, right?
Me too. I was
Because
just looking.
This is clearly,
Not what you
no
want.
matter where you put all those pawns, if it's hanging pawns, you need queens on to prove anything.
Exactly.
Luckily
so.
for Magnus, of course, he's going to play the other knight to here. And it's probably not that clear if queen b2 is such a great move, because I'm going to play rook b1. Although it's still, I could make any normal move here, because rook b1, something like queen c3 might be possible, but it might look a little risky from Anish's perspective.
I wasn't looking at knight e5, f3. I was looking at queen f2.
Queen f2 or queen e3, of course, also a possibility, absolutely.
And like you say, rook b1 is coming to push, and knight e4 loses to knight takes e4.
Yes,
that's a piece.
that's actually
That's
actually something I forgot about. That's why this is a very important
detail.
Yes, and white gets to take back with the knight.
Right.
So queen to b2, it's a concrete move. It's not a very good move, most likely.
Right. So, okay. From Black's point of view, he needs to put his rooks on c8 and d8, but he needs to be careful that that once you figured it all out where you want your majors, that knight comes to g5, doesn't come, I always accuse my dear friend Larry Christensen of being a caveman. He's got this caveman-like approach. He carries this huge club, and he swings at you, right? But you can see the club coming, right? And you can duck and bob and weave.
Yeah.
The problem is when the club hits you, it's over.
Yeah.
And he just beats you, And this knight f3 g5 is a kind of a Larry Christensen. The big club is coming. You know it's coming, but if you don't get out of the way, it hits you. How does he get out of the way?
It's a good question. I personally have this obsession with attacking d4 one way or another. And like you said, I don't want to really remove my rook from f8 because I feel that it's really a club swing at me. If f7 is going to be hanging at that point, that's why maybe Anish is thinking about a little bit more unorthodox positioning of the rooks. For example, rook ad8 could be something to consider, given that knight is going to come to g5. f8 might not be the worst square for his rook.
Yeah, with or without the trade, right? Okay, so we'll go along with the program for a sec, and the club is coming.
Yes.
Just
so now,
to let you know.
Now the question is, where do I get my counterplay from? And
Right.
that's why personally I was sort of enjoying this queen b2 move. Now, okay, I'm just going to I'm going to
Yes, let's do it
put it on
again.
the board one more time because I
Right.
feel that at least I'm still stopping your move knight f3.
Right.
So, I don't want to take that.
Right.
Imagine I play the move rook d8 now. Is this
Okay.
in any sort of way annoying for you, or do you not really care too much about any of this?
Okay. Rook. Well, I want to chase your queen. I find your queen very disturbing,
Yeah.
actually.
So,
By the way, earlier I had traded these pawns on c4 just to clarify the structure.
yeah.
There's a problem that if you don't trade, you give white the option, maybe the surprising option of
Yeah.
recapturing with a knight, and then something bad happens because in that exact position,
Yeah, knight
knight
to
takes
d6
actually
or-
works
Yeah.
for some flawed reason. Here, this just looks wrong, right?
Yeah, queen takes a2 is not what I want to do. This
'Cause,
definitely doesn't look right.
Right.
Now I'd have to return to a3, and sort of hoping
That you've misplaced
that with
my,
that I've
my
misplaced
queen.
your queen. So for example, if you do decide to go knight f3,
Right.
d takes c4.
D takes c4.
B takes c4.
D takes c4.
If there's any tactics like bishop takes f3, that
Absolutely.
would be great. But perhaps it simply doesn't work.
It would be great, except there is a dirty trick.
Yes,
Do,
there's bishop takes h7, and so my knight takes e5 ideas, they all fail to.
Yeah.
Actually, the immediate bishop takes h7 if you want to.
Right, but your
yeah.
basic intent was that your rook is going to slam down
Exactly,
d4 and,
exactly.
and kill me.
Yeah.
Except for the bishop h7.
Yeah, so although at first sight to me the position doesn't look so appealing for white. Like normally when I'm thinking about this bishop on b2, like this position over here, I feel like, oh, white should have played a3, stopping this idea. But now that we're actually in the position and Magnus has played f4, at least it's not necessarily common sense moves that solve the problems. White's next moves are simple,
Right.
and black's moves aren't necessarily simple. So that Magnus has that playing in his favor, and I expect Anish to really put some time into the position now because he needs to understand how to act. It's not an entirely standard hanging pawns position because of this exchange.
Yeah, very, very intriguing. Let me just throw this one down for a second. You've been talking about how queen b2 might be disruptive. How about queen a3?
Yeah, so queen is c3. Imagine we're trying our knight f3.
Again?
Now your idea would be to take, I guess?
Yes, precisely.
And I would have
this
to...
provokes you to play knight back.
Yes,
Takes
knight
f3.
back.
But then has that been a successful trade that I forced your knight out of the center, or is it just some kind of a temporary fancy? Intriguing position. We're going to take one more game, and then we're going to take our first break. Where would you like to go? We haven't
let's
seen
have a look
Nepo.
at Adiban's game,
Oh,
actually.
Adiban.
Who plays extremely exciting chess. Actually, when I was looking at the scoreboard, so to speak, or the current standings, Adiban had -1. But the feeling I get when I think about Adiban's tournament, of course, I'm biased because I was there in Rotterdam when he won his game against Gary Karyakin
Right.
in beautiful style.
Right.
But it feels like, especially yesterday, having a pretty good opening with the King's Gambit against
Right.
nobody else less than Wesley So.
Right.
I kind of feel like, wow, this guy's doing really great. But then
Right.
again, it's a tough tournament. He already had 2 losses.
Right.
But I think I speak for everyone when I say that he's playing very enterprising chess. And he's not afraid of anything because he's
Right.
playing some of the most dangerous openings. Try play the French against Sergei. Try playing the King's Gambit against Wesley. Those
Right.
are not things many of the top players dare
Get
to
away
do.
with, yeah.
This is the first time for him facing these type of players, and he's just going for it.
Right.
So I really admire that. I think that's a great quality of his.
When you think about players whose games I like to follow, I must say that I was really biased. Whether he was doing great or even poorly, I wasn't even looking at the tournament leaders, the world champions, whomever. If Alexander Morozevich was in the tournament, and I woke up in the morning, I wanted to see that guy's play first. Because,
exactly.
And, is Bhaskaran performing in such a style that he's inspiring so many people to follow his games that you have to take a look at them. Tony Miles is very happy.
Yes.
Yes.
Is this? I feel like this is a British specialty, by the way. Whenever I see this, it's either Nigel Short or it's maybe like someone like Gawain Jones or Luke McShane. Like they all love this E6 B6, and I really think that you're right. It's a legacy of
Tony Miles.
Tony Miles.
Well, Tony Miles left a great impression, not only on UK chess circles, but just across the globe. And he came to the United States, and I can tell you something. He was a real beast in open tournaments. I mean, his style was like this gambler's style of going for it, combined just when you think, okay, I've neutralized the guy and he's not going to kill me, then he had great technique.
Yeah.
He was really good at game players. Like, where was his weakness? I mean, theoretically, he played really sharp. And okay, Bishop B4, Queen C2. Okay, Radek takes a very restrained approach. I remember in the good old days, there was a guy, Kenneth Regan, and, okay, just a second, let me turn that off. And after E4, Bishop B7, there was knight here, bishop here. Father, the Catholic priest, Father Bill Lombardi was white. Kenneth Regan, my peer, or junior player, was black. And this turned out into a complete mess. Okay. And I was following their game. I was so excited. I was 14 at the time, and Bill Lombardi was one of the first grandmasters I had met in the flesh.
Sure, yeah.
Right?
Former World Junior Champion as well, right?
Yeah, won the World Junior Championship with a perfect score.
Amazing,
A second to Bobby Fischer.
Bobby,
yeah. And I was watching their game, and it ended up in a very exciting draw. And I came to the postmortem, and I was just watching, because I thought Kenny had a chance in the game to get an edge, and I was waiting for them to get to that position. They got to the position, and they didn't look at my move. Okay. By the way, I'm not sure I can tell this on the air, but I'll tell the story anyway. So I chirped in. I said, Mr. Lombardi, couldn't your opponent have played this move, which sacrifices a knight? And it was a good move. And Bill had a stogie, this big, thick cigar. And he twisted it around in his mouth, pulled it out, blew a plume of blue smoke really high into the air, and he looked at me and he said, "Another effing genius." I didn't talk to anybody for 2 weeks. But this is a fun variation.
It's a lot of fun.
Look up that game because it was great. Bishop b4, Queen c2. Yes. Okay, but this is a classical Nimzo, Queen c2. You win the piece, but you give Black the option of f5.
Exactly.
Which
Black has
Bhaskaran jumped on.
Yes, really, and I think after knight f6 we're entering a very normal line in the Nimzo Indian, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Peter Liko who's playing like that. But f5, that's the reason that Black goes for this, because you want to keep it exciting, right?
Right.
And I was about to say I didn't realize it was played. What is interesting is that White now has an idea of his own, because Black hasn't committed to knight f6. White hasn't committed to knight f3 being a normal move. So White has this idea of f3, knight f2 in return. So we're getting just a very interesting Nimzo, which has a completely different dynamic to it, because White now is actually sort of playing against that bishop on b7 much more than when he's putting the knight on f3. So
wonderful stuff.
Yeah, nice opening, something a little offbeat.
Indeed. Ooh, e2, e3. Okay. Essentially, I guess, from White's point of view, if he plays a desirable move like bishop g5, the problem is that if you get all kicked back, well, your pieces are kind of getting gummied up a little here.
They're not very coordinated anymore,
So we can understand the move e3, knight
Yeah.
h5.
I think this is just very opportunistic sort of play, right? He wants to go, I guess, queen h4 in the near future.
Right.
The question
Trying
is
to provoke g3, which would make this bishop a good one. Yeah. The question is.
No, the question is, of course, does he not need to think about his development first? Like, aren't you supposed to go d6, knight d7 first? But maybe Adibon thought that he could give that check and develop a little bit later.
If you go d6 immediately, you were mentioning that I haven't committed my knight to f3. I haven't committed it to f2 either.
So perhaps knight f4 is what you're hinting at, I guess.
Right, and after a move like, say, queen e7, there's some ramifications.
Yes.
I don't think you really want to capture that pawn on d5.
No, I don't.
Welcome to my trap.
Yeah.
Bishop c4 will be a pin.
So that actually explains his idea of knight h5. He's stopping knight f4, kind of preparing also d6, not only queen h4.
But the other, you're right, d6, knight d7, very standard. The other way, maybe it's a little slow, but knight c6, knight c6, with our old favorite Ruy Lopez, bring the knight to g6.
Sure.
Anish Giri, in the latest New in Chess magazine, was annotating, and he said he doesn't know if it's a Russian thing, but everybody seems to be bringing their knights to g6 in the Joko Piano and Ruy Lopez. That it seems like a part of the DNA. You go to the Russian School of Chess, and you come out and you put your knight on g6, showing understanding, right?
Yeah.
No understanding here. Knight h5 was the choice. Bishop e2. Well, check. Knight f2.
And now he does decide to go for that development.
d6. Okay. White also has a very key question. What is he going to do with his bishop? Radek decided on the move b2, b3, but there's been a school of thought that b2, b4 has been a more aggressive way. You want to play b2 and d5. I had some old games with that, with Anatoly Karpov like this. But one of the problems, as I found out to my lament, was that after b4, knight d7, bishop b2, there's a funny thing that can happen.
Yeah.
That black plays b5.
Himself, yes.
Right.
And gets some d5
square.
Control, right?
Right. So the drawback to b4 is that in the future, there is this b5, and you would rather have the pawn on b3 in that case. So, big theoretical discussion. He answered it with b3 for us. Knight d7, bishop b2, e5, d5, shutting down the position, f4.
So turning almost into a very King's Indian-like position now.
Exactly.
Where I think both sides suddenly don't feel too happy about their bishops.
Right. This one is not winning any plaudits, that is for sure. And, well, I'm a fan of space. I got that from Victor Korchnoi, who despised the King's Indian, by the way. He just thought it was an unplayable...
losing opening.
Except Garry Kasparov, Bobby Fischer,
and
played
a
few other greats actually beat him on the black side. First impressions?
First impression, although... As you know, I'm a big King's Indian fanatic. This is not a very good position for black, I think. And actually, the main reason I say that is that I'm kind of afraid of this idea of white playing g3 sooner than later. And if I cannot respond f takes g3, which it becomes very concrete once again.
Exactly.
But if I somehow have to play a move like queen f6, that would be or queen g5, that would be disastrous, because he would get to play something like g4, h4. Now the other thing is white hasn't committed his king yet, so I don't feel like I'm really going to mate him over here. That king is very likely to go to the queen side, and that would still give white maybe an opportunity to open up on the king side at his choice, and then looking at the queen side, I don't think black should ever touch that too much, because something like c6 would predominantly create weaknesses in his position more than anything. So My first feeling, Yasser, is that although it might be a very difficult breakthrough for white if g3 very soon doesn't work, I do feel that this is a space advantage where white is, in a way, almost better on both sides of the board.
Yeah, again, I'll echo that, and I do like white's position. Having said that, losing the dark square bishop isn't the worst thing that ever happened.
No, not in this position. Not
to
in this
black,
position.
considering his structure. All right. Well, what do we have here? We're going to have one more look at the Luc Van Velle's game. Let us. That was that incredible bishop.
Oh, okay.
Nothing has happened. By the way, look at the times. We was almost 40 minutes up on the clock, by the way.
Yeah,
and after knight takes east. Oh, he is still up. 40
this
minutes.
is a very, very worrisome
sign indeed.
Yeah.
He hasn't used any time.
No, he hasn't.
And poor Luke has been tanking. Do you have that word in Dutch, by the way?
Tanking?
When you go into a think and you tank, it's tanking.
Tanking. Well, he's definitely been
he
tanking.
He went into a big tank, didn't he? Why? I mean, Luke is a Najdorf specialist. He knows, he's been studying this for the better part of 20 years. He knows these positions in and out.
That is true. Knowing Luke quite well, Luke is a really, really good Sicilian player.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, nowadays, it's not enough to be a good Sicilian player. You need to be a very good theoretician, and only then you will get to show off your playing skills. Mm-hmm. And I feel that every single time he tries to go for the Sicilian in the Bike aan Zee, everyone is just holding their heart, because is Lucas actually going to survive this opening? And
right.
The more I've been thinking about this position a little bit more, Yasser, and I'm
mm-hmm.
fairly sure that my old suggestion of King F7, I'm almost certain this is the move.
Okay.
And just to point this out one more time, because we didn't go into it much, but I have the feeling that the main reason is B2, B4 over here, which creates this option of you're pretty much
forced to take it, yes.
And I think it might be related to some sort of check here.
And after King F7, now the other knight,
yes.
Knight C3 jumps to D5. If I take, you will capture the queen.
Yeah.
And there goes the rook.
Exactly.
On A8. Oops.
I think it is something related to this.
This looks very scary.
It looks very scary. Perhaps there's other moves like king to F8.
Maybe a better choice.
Yeah. But I almost feel like
this is
I
where
feel like even here maybe it is something of this sort that white plays, and the question really is, where does the queen go?
You can't take on E4 because of knight takes E7, winning back the piece.
Exactly. Here we have a
dividends.
Check.
Yes.
So, and again, this is very hard to calculate without knowing the theory and whatnot. But I'm very worried for Luke, because if he has to think about this over the board, I really don't predict a very good outcome of this game for him. And that's again why I'm coming back to King F7, where you really need to know where the king should go here. I'm really 90% sure this is the way. And here it was important. I think it's King F8 and not King G8. But again, Luke should know this, and clearly he either forgot or he doesn't know. But
that's a very, very bad sign in a position that's super sharp. And in a position where your opponent has used zero time on his clock. It's like he's just recalling his homework.
And that's not even the worst news, Yasser. I mean, we're playing Wei
worse.
Yi, who is like, you know that if you're not making that best move, Wei Yi is going to punish it for sure.
Exactly.
It's such an amazing calculator and such a fierce attacking player that, that's why Luke right now is kind of in dire straits, I would say. I mean, really, if he doesn't know what to do here,
very, very
bad situation.
Have you played Wei Yi, by the way?
Yeah, I've played Wei Yi on 2 occasions there were 2 draws, and I had the luck of playing him with white both times, and both times were bishop b5 check Sicilians.
You're ducking his knight, or
yes, feeling very, very confident. The second time especially going for some sort of more Roxy structure and having a slight edge. Okay, I didn't manage to bring it home, but hey, I had a great time.
Right, pressing him and keeping him down.
So yeah,
we're going to take one final tweet before we do take our first break of the day, as we bring you live action from Game 7, and we have, what does it say up there? It's all Dutch to me.
Mayor Freek also opens the round today at Tata Steel Chess with a strong and fierce gong.
Yes, very nice. So
that
the mayor of Beverwijk or the mayor of Bijkans-Zee?
Beverwijk mayor. So that's the nearby, yes, a bigger city. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it's always nice when we have the politicians coming and supporting.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think in the past we've had Rutte, actually.
Rutte?
Coming.
Our Prime Minister,
yes. Coming to the opening.
Yeah.
It was very nice of him to make the occasion. We're going to take a break. This is your host, Grandmaster Yasso Serron, along with our good friend Robin van Kampen, taking a look at this action from round 7 at Tata Steel Chess. We'll be back in 10 minutes.
And the round will be opened today by the mayor of Beverwijk, Mr. Freek also. After his hit on the gong, the games can start. Enjoy and good luck.
you do before the game? Would you prefer What do you do before the game? Would you prefer intense preparation till the last minute or to go for a walk on the beach?
Walk on the beach.
Go for a walk on the beach.
Walk on the beach.
Probably walking on the beach.
Definitely go for a walk on the beach. Last minute doesn't work.
Intense preparation till last minute.
I prefer to walk on the beach, but mostly it's intense preparation.
If you had to choose between getting up early every day or going to bed late, never before 4 a.m., which one would you pick?
No, get up early every day.
I would go to bed very late.
Getting up early.
I get close to 4 a.m. sometimes, so I would pick 4 a.m. for sure.
I prefer the former. You know, chess players don't really have a strict sleeping schedule, so prefer to sleep late.
At 4 a.m. I'm always up since October 3. So, but I'm going to sleep, so I would prefer to get up early.
Never go to sleep before 4 a.m. Definitely a night owl.
Would you accept to get up early every day for the rest of your life or...
Next question, no. The other option.
Would you rather work with a second who doesn't speak any language that you understand or to have a very slow computer?
Second, who doesn't understand. Yeah, we don't have a language. I'll take that.
Chess has its own language.
Probably take the second who doesn't speak any of the language I speak.
Facial expressions, something like that. But I just can't use something slow anymore. I'm too addicted to the computers.
Half my seconds, I don't understand what they're saying.
I tend to bang my laptops if they're not working.
Would you prefer to play a chess game against Bobby Fischer or to beat Magnus Carlsen?
First one.
Win against Magnus Carlsen.
Prefer to beat Magnus.
Beat Magnus Carlsen.
Bobby Fischer.
To beat Magnus. Beat Magnus.
Bobby Fischer? Because that's not possible.
Yeah. Magnus, who among your fellow chess players is the most stylish?
I don't know. I haven't thought too much about that. I think Anish will be disappointed if I don't say him, so I'll say Anish Giri.
He will be so pleased. Who is the best football mate?
It depends on who is the best and who is, the best teammate. In this tournament, I don't know. Tomaszewski played last year and was actually very, very good. Very solid.
You are missing him from this year.
I'm missing him in the football field for sure. And I would say Luke is decent, but I would never be in the same team with him. So, yeah.
Why so?
We're pretend rivals.
Who is the best dancer?
I have no clue.
Who would you say among the masters?
I've been fortunate not to find out.
Who's got the best Twitter account?
I don't know. It all depends on whether you consider quality or activity or whatever. But maybe Anish again.
You like him a lot?
Yeah, I do.
Who's got the best jokes?
Me.
I think everybody agrees.
That was a joke, by the way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our live coverage of the 2017 Tata Steel Chess Tournament. We are in round 7, and this is your host, Chess Grandmaster Yasser Sarawan, alongside with Grandmaster Robin Van Kampen. Robin, when we had left the Magnus Carlsen game, Anish Giri game, we seen this move f4, swinging a big club, and we were looking at Queen b2, but I think we convinced ourselves that, well, maybe it's not the best. Anish couldn't find anything better.
Yeah.
So after Queen b2, Magnus did not go for
Queen f2,
my
right?
Queen f2 move, which would simply defend the pawn on d4. Instead, he reacted with your first suggestion, which was drawing back the knight from e5.
I thought maybe it had to do... There was one thing that I didn't suggest, but should have probably paid some attention to it, is to take here.
I want to take with the f-pawn.
You want to pay, but if you take with the f-pawn...
Yes.
And yes, no, I do remember now, knight g4, you go queen to f4,
right.
And you still have everything protected. So this was probably not the reason that he didn't go for this. So what was the actual reason why not queen f2 is still left to be answered? Maybe something to ask one of the players after the game, because I was sort of convinced with your suggestion here that Queen b2 looks a little awkward.
Right, well, especially if after Queen f2 I do get in the tempo booting your queen out of b2, which is annoying. Maybe we should just continue that line for a bit. There is a trick in the position. I only spotted it as we were talking. Queen f4. I had spoken in the past how sometimes you want to define the pawn structure early so as not to make a knight takes possible. In this moment, there's queen g2 mate.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not really something to...
That's the ice bucket challenge in chess, you know, when you allow mate in one.
Then actually, Yasser, I think you're really onto something here with rook d8, for sure. And suddenly we see sort of Black's dream scenario where he somehow manages to engineer a serious attack against the d4 pawn.
Right.
And perhaps it was something of this sort that
dissuaded
put Magnus off. Yeah,
right.
That he didn't like. Actually, this seems to work because knight f3, for example, we can take it with the bishop, and that just seems like after g takes, you can take on d4, right?
Right.
And
life is good.
Life is very good for Black suddenly. So
yeah, h2. Yeah. So Magnus did retreat the knight, and maybe he was in fact compelled to do so. Takes, and I think
the
queen very quickly.
I think working with Anish for a long time definitely influenced my way of looking at this position, because I was sort of saying, like, I would love to get queen b2 and just exchange the queens at all costs.
Yes, that
which
would be your
you
goal.
know, some would maybe say is a somewhat passive way of, or like at least very defensive way of approaching the position. But when I look at this position, although white is of course active and he has maybe a4, a5 ideas, my first impression is, well, this should be all right for Black, one way or another.
In any case, Black is happy to trade queens. I always liked, maybe even disliked at times, this comment that was always appearing in the Soviet magazine. This move meets the needs of the position. Trading queens for Black, like you say, it's kind of passive and it's not going to make all the chess fans very happy, but it meets the needs of the position. Okay, and a4 right away.
Yeah.
Of course, in this position, you can almost say that the a2 pawn is, well, obviously it's an island, but it's a potential weakness. If you can scurry that pawn up the board, turn it from a weakness and create a weakness in your opponent's camp, a4. Rook c7, a5, rook. All of these moves seem to be coming rather quickly, I must say.
Yeah.
And we're up to date with the players now. Let me just double check that. I don't know, what's their times over there? An hour, 4 minutes for
Magnus, as usual, was a little bit up on the clock, 20 minutes over here. But Anish is not really in time trouble either. 45 minutes, but only 15. They already played 25 moves.
They played quickly.
Only 16 moves there for him, 15 for Magnus, left for 40.
Well, the big question for me, Robin, is how are we going to meet knight f5? Gift me the pawn. I want to take the pawn on d4.
Yeah, although Magnus, you could call it an achievement that he's managed to provoke Anish into taking on a5 and, fragmenting his pawn structure somewhat, especially his a pawn. But then again, the major goal for Black didn't change. It's really just to attack those two pawns. And if I have to go c5, that seems almost like something you might have to commit to at some point.
Right. You'd think that Black is happy with this achievement. On the other hand, it's a pass pawn.
Yeah, to be honest, Jasper, my first impression is maybe not really for good reason, but it seems a little bit more pleasant for white.
Sure,
with
you
the
love
easy
the
rook
space.
ca1 coming.
Yeah.
And perhaps I could do something like bishop to d3, trying to get rid of that attacker on f5. And I see a lot of scenarios where, simply the more healthy pawn structure by white, who just managed to, change his hanging pawns into a defended pass pawn. Let's be reasonable.
Right.
It could turn out quite well. So, although maybe with concrete play Black manages to be okay, I for one really dislike the idea that every time I try to do something like rook c d7, I almost can never even take on d4 simply because the c pawn starts running.
Exactly.
And so I feel that Magnus,
not much of a threat.
Magnus has gotten a lot more out of this than I expected him to.
Yes,
at first sight.
Yeah, well, indeed, on first, second, and third sight. I really like Magnus's position for all of the reasons you mentioned. And I'm a big structure guy myself, loving these pawns. Bishop coming to d3 on a real bad day. Let's just put another move. I mean, we're not 100% sure the knight's so great there, but if we imagine that white gets ever this wonderful achievement of putting the knight along with the bishop, then, well, we just play in majestic style and win almost comfortably.
I must say that, of course, it's already a hindsight thought, but I'm just very surprised by the way that Anish was so convinced of his knight takes b6. After the standard procedure that Carlsen did here with a4, a5. A takes b6 to me, although it's not necessarily active, it's still very much the standard approach. And I have ideas like knight e8, knight d6 to put some pressure on the c pawn.
Yep.
To me, this seems like a more healthy approach, one that requires less positional risk at least.
Right. So here, what you're making a very interesting point. You're willing to go with this pawn weakness, so to speak, with the b6. The pawn is going to be weak on a7, is in the game, but at least with the pawn on b6, you've made a very concrete stand, and you're saying, I'm not going to give you this pass pawn, and I'll go, as you say.
Exactly. I still stop white from advancing these pawns, and that's more important to me than any sort of quick attack that he managed to get with knight takes b6.
Which brings up the following question. If you are going to accept the pawn on b6 as a weak pawn, then perhaps you should play a7, a5 and say, okay, I've got this weak pawn on b6, but at least, if worse comes to worse, some time down the road, I end up sacrificing an exchange, as we might imagine, on the c4 square. Because I end up getting a great knight on d5 as a return, but then I'll hit this a4 pawn. There was a game from the Bobby Fischer-Boris Spassky match of 1972 where there was double pawns. There was a c4, c3. White has played the move a4. Spassky played the move a4, and Bobby went a5 and said, "Okay, I've got this weakness on b6. Do something about it." There was a very good knight defending it.
For sure.
But I think we're both of the opinion that whatever approach he has made, concretely, I mean, that Magnus has gotten much more out of this than we both expected. This just simply looks like a very pleasant position for Magnus, and he loves grinding. Now, Anish is a great defender. I mean, you don't go through a world candidates tournament without a loss, without having been tested. He's going to be tested today. I don't like this
Absolutely,
position.
and the thing is that, of course, this is the type of position that I feel Magnus just really excels at. When he has a better endgame, that's Magnus at his happiest, so to speak. So I think this is a very tough situation for Anish at first sight.
Let's go to our big theoretical contest, and that is the game between Yi Wei and Loke Van Velde. When we left it, we found Loke in all kinds of dire straits. You had mentioned King F7, and then you would answer. Then you would answer the move with the counterintuitive, either King F8 or King E8.
Mm-hmm.
I'm told that there's been games with both. That King E8 is the surprising way of meeting Knight G5. Having said that, Knight C5 we didn't like for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which I, by the way, just grab the pawn on G7
and also
and
that,
take the
but,
3 pawns.
I think Wei Yi, he's going to maximize whatever he can get out of this position now, especially. I mean, imagine him sitting there with 1 hour and 20 minutes on the clock, or even more than that. At this point, 1 hour and 40 minutes. He's only just started the game.
Right.
His opponent is down to about 20 minutes, and he knows he's just made what is probably a really big mistake. I mean, can you wish for any better start of the day?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
So, but Wei Yi, actually playing very fast here, decided to go with b4, which, we already mentioned against knight e5 was probably the way to go for white.
Also very attractive, right? And after queen takes b4 check, the king had to give up his castling privileges. Knight d5. Knight takes d5, knight takes d5. Queen a3. Wei Yi to play. Now, everything seems to be wrong.
Yeah,
but
that's a good way of putting it.
I mean, just like everything seems to be wrong, and from my point of view,
e5 is just screaming to be played.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You just say, "Look, I've got this rook on e1. I'm staring down this king on d8. I have a very simple job: open the position, and e4, e5 with a threat of knight e7, queen d6. This looks like splat." Do you see a good, not a good defense, do you see a defense?
Well, the thing is, it's, the moment that you feel like d takes e5 is your only chance, that's probably a very bad moment. But
walking into a discovered check.
It's the only move so
that
far
makes sense.
That, when I'm trying to calculate this, I can't immediately refute it. Of course, you could take my rook on a8, but that means you're letting my king escape to b8, which, it might just be a horrible position. I'm not getting mated. That's the good news.
That is the good news. I think it kind of stops there, though, because now I have material, don't I? I haven't sacrificed.
I need to play,
great. No, this is. I haven't chased your king to b8 and sacrificed a piece, a rook, a knight, and a pawn, to get it there. In fact, the knight is looking to return into the game very nicely. Now, having said that, by the way, though, even though your king made its route to b8, I'm sitting there saying, wait a minute, can't I, kill you somehow? Let me just set up, queen f3 might, new variation. I'm sitting there thinking, all I want to do, really, is, that was supposed to be the square.
Yeah, sure.
All I wanted to do, really, was to bring all my pieces into the attack.
Yeah, and again, we're seeing this theme of, we're moving the bishop with a check. So you're actually hitting my queen on a3 right now with the tempo.
Exactly.
What an unpleasant
with time on the clock as well.
Move to face as well. Probably, I like the approach a lot, Yasser, because like I said, it's a strange thing, but I feel it's a victory for black. I didn't get mated. I got to b8 with my king. If you go knight b6, but your suggestion. I mean, honestly, Lucas just lost.
Yes. We've been told that for Loke Van Velde, this is his 25th Vaikonze. Probably that makes him. I know John Vandervelde at one point had like a streak of 22 tournaments. So that must make Luke in the 79-year history as the player who's played the most in Vaikonze. That's
very impressive.
How old did you say you were?
22. He was playing here before I was born.
Okay, there you have it. And he hasn't, unfortunately for Luke, he's had some good tournaments, but Vaikonze, overall, if you look at his tournament record, it hasn't been pleasant for him. Let's go to the game of Wesley So, our tournament leader.
And the quiz question for those, if you wanna, answer this on Twitter. How many times out of the 25 did Luke finish last?
Oops.
It's a little quiz for the people at home. By the way, Jasper, do you realize that Luke has spent almost 2 years of his life in Vaikonze?
Well, if it's in 1 month,
of course it's a little bit less, but
it's close to
at least mentally, it feels like you're here for a month, having played here. You also have played here, I imagine.
Right.
I always felt that it's like
more than a month.
Exactly. It's like 3 weeks, technically, more or less.
Right.
But it's tiring. Wow.
Well, for me especially, I was coming from Seattle, so if you add in the travel times before, the travel return afterwards, and then your feeling of preparation and putting in some time and efforts, it definitely took more than a month of my life.
Yeah.
This is a marathon tournament, and by the way, we're just today basically getting to the halfway point and crossing it as we go into round 7. We left Wesley So versus Pavel back at these parts, and the bishops got hacked off the board, but Wesley got in a d3, d4. Okay, making some pretensions that he has some space. Knight. Did you see that one coming? Knight f3, d2?
No, it doesn't look like a move you'd like to play as white. That's why I was proposing something like rook e1. Then again, black's plan is... The thing I like about these positions for black is it's also quite simple. You basically either keep that knight on e7 if you're afraid of some sort of knight e3, knight f5. If that no longer bothers you, then you can, like the Russians do, put it on g6.
Exactly. And then on a... You slowly, you prepare this. The reason why I can follow Wesley here a bit with this move knight f3 to d2, he's contemplating that he's going to close the position with d4, d5. Okay, great. When you've closed the position with d5, f2, f4 is the lever, as well as this knight might, I don't know, on a good day, find some better pastures.
Yep.
Okay, let's see how the game progressed. Castles, queen e2, g3.
Yeah, I think it's really an anticipation of knight g6 and maybe, saying, well, watch out for f4. I might be able to take with my pawn sometimes now.
Right, so also kind of a preemptive strike. Before you get to g6, I'll stop you. Okay, but the funny part, as I was going to say, I finally recognized some progress for Wesley, a4, a5.
Yeah, that's a nice
that is
move.
a real progress. Yeah. That's just basically saying some endings, be careful, there's some pawn breakthroughs, I'm gaining some space, I'm preventing a5, but rook c8, the mysterious rook move.
Of course, I think it's important to mention that what the players are really thinking about, as long as Wesley hasn't defined his strategy with d4, d5, he needs to continuously calculate what happens if black plays d5. So this would be, for example, if you're wondering, like, why are these players spending so much time? This looks so simple. Well, that's because black actually has an option to seriously change the nature of the position.
With d5, yes.
So that's why, white needs to make sure that also after d5 he's comfortable with his position and that he can actually afford slower moves like a4, a5.
Exactly. Now, rook c8, care to give that one an explanation?
Yeah, during the World Championship match, Magnus also played rook c8, kind of like in a position like this, where you were like, well, I understand, but I don't really understand.
Exactly.
And I think this is one of these positions where I think he's just anticipating d5, really. And he's thinking, maybe I'll throw in c6 in some positions. But honestly, it is a mysterious move to me.
Me too. It's sort of like you're saying to yourself, the rook is better on c8 versus the a8 square, and I won't argue that. But
Yeah.
I mean, well,
Congratulations.
yeah, well done. I mean, yeah. But I would equally argue that because we are looking at the opportunity of playing d6, d5 ourselves, that the rook, in fact, might be best on the d8 square. Okay, and in anticipation of either d5 or d4 takes e5. Well, there you have it. A mysterious rook move for me, d5, everybody's happy, the situation is defined. Knight f6 to h7, you would have thought that black's rook c8 was designed to play c6. I guess there was some doubts about that suddenly. Knight, and now everything goes backwards again, and we're looking at a different break.
Yeah.
Rook a3.
I must say, Yasser, to me, these positions, and I really think that white is, slowly but surely creating a bit of an edge here, especially looking at the queen side with this nice a5. Now, rook b3, once he forces black to play rook b8, and c6 is very unlikely to be a good move. But with all of that being said, I, as white, always struggle once it becomes clear that my opponent's going to play rook f8, f5, and gets all that active play. And especially being a King's Indian player, I get annoyed because I feel like I'm doing all this effort and like I'm making all these subtle moves, and black just knows that you can make as much little progress on the queen side as you can, but f5 is going to come and it's going to be horribly active.
Right.
So always, even if it's a little bit better for white, I find it very unclear in practice. Once that plan comes through, and also with moves like knight g5 potentially jumping in, the computer might say a little bit better, the top grandmaster say a little bit better. But in practice, I would not be too worried as black, as long as I have that plan working for me.
Well, it's like we say 3 results are possible, and you're the 2 results guy.
Yes.
And the results are in your favor, right? The 2 results that you want. Okay, rook f8. Well, as you say, I mean, and have we updated the game? Rook f8 being our last move. Rook b3. Wow. Check this out. This is cool. Modern chess is at its best. Rook f1 to a1. Humana, what is that? Okay, I mean, Wesley actually did something similar to this in his game with Loke Van Wely. There were double b pawns. He went rook a6, rook b6, and he crawled his way and he started targeting these pawns. Well, in this case, he's simply saying, I don't believe your activity. Well, I guess I'll take it with a knight.
Yeah, maybe force as many exchanges as possible.
I don't believe your activity on the king side
is all that much.
It's all that much. My rook, I think his intention, just a second, sorry. I think his intention is as crude as bringing the rook to a4, bringing the rook to b4, and saying, well, you're not checkmating me.
Yeah, for sure. And I do feel that he doesn't run that much risk in a way, because I don't see a straightforward way. The way that this would become dangerous if the knight on h7 would find some sort of post to be an attacking piece, but you're just going to exchange it as soon as the opportunity presents itself, and continue with your plan. What I also find fascinating is that I feel like Pavel Elyanov so far in every game is trying to purposely go for imbalanced positions. I was talking about how he did this against Hare Krishna, where he had a kind of a hanging pawn structure, and I really felt like they were repeating the moves. A draw was a logical result, and he took a lot of risk, excessive risk in my opinion, playing that on and suffering a little bit for the draw in the end. Yeah. And then against Aronian, it didn't go right for him.
That was the one loss he had, yes.
But he always tries to go for complications. And I think today is no different. And I'm not saying that Wesley's not playing a great game, but it seems to me that Pavel is not, when I was talking about moves like d5 before white played it and so on, I almost feel like a move like rook c8 came just because he wanted Wesley to actually play d5, hoping that there will be counter chances and playing for 3 results, like you said it. And I think it's fascinating because he's just trying to fight every game.
Exactly. Well, for me, Pavel is really in one of those super unfortunate places. I want to say he's actually in a kind of a no man's land, and I really sympathize with him. What I mean to say is he's broken into the world's top 20, which is just fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, really, really great. The problem is that the elite tournaments are really for the top 10.
Yeah.
And he's in that situation where he's trying to get invitations to the elite tournaments, but he's just in this no man's land where he's too strong to play in tournaments beneath
the open tournaments.
Yeah, the open tournaments that might be beneath his true strength. And when he gets what he would call, and he's described it in an interview, a decent invitation, like on Zay being a decent invitation, he's really put the pressure on him that he's really got to perform, so that other organizers will wake up and go, whoa, this guy's really serious. Look at him. He started with 3.5 out of 4. He's fighting hard in every game. Invite me.
Kudos to him.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
He's doing an amazing job exactly at doing that. I feel that he's, he's traditionally, although we've seen very different chess of him, I feel like he's a bit more solid than what he's showing here. So also just adjusting his style to maybe even get more attentions from the fans and from the organizers. I find it very impressive, and I don't see him stopping, his endeavor anytime soon. Today again, he's trying to. It might not work out well for him, but he's trying to create some real life in the positions.
Exactly.
Really, really great. I mean, that's exactly the type of players you're looking for as an organizer.
Without question, and I must say that also, I watched him live in Baku, where he was leading the Ukrainian team on. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I'm very happy that the United States won, but let me emphasize that we tied for first, and it was only a tiebreaker that brought us the gold medal. And I mean, Ukraine on paper is very strong, but they weren't a clear favorite like was the U.S. or Russia.
For sure. And he was a great first board.
It was great, and he played so incredibly well. I'm going to switch now over to the game of Sergei Karyakin versus Levon Aronian. This was the game that featured a double blind spot. I went out today, the weekend. Oh, it's packed. The people can see the camera behind me. The people at the Demorian, the playing hall is packed, and there's a lot of kids. It's weekends for the kids. They're having a lot of specials with the children. Autograph hounds. Well, I was running the gauntlet to get back into the studio here. It was confirmed to me by those chess fans, because quite a number have come out to me. Did you see that Sergei could have played c4? All of the amateur players are like, if I had been there, I would have won the bishop.
Yeah, and won the game. And won that was a full piece.
That was a full piece. So let's take it. We have left the game just around these parts. Sergei gave up his light square bishop for a reason.
Yeah, I must say, Yasser, this game has developed into what I would say a bit of an off day for both players. I thought that everything was going on was a little strange. But one thing I did notice is in my previous comments, I was talking about this bailout option of taking on a2, and I did realize, I think it's rook d3 that maybe I didn't calculate properly here, because I'm not sure I can save my piece here with black, because the bishop will be hanging. Yeah.
Some clever move.
Yeah, so maybe it wasn't all that simple for Aronian, who just decided bishop c6, and the game continued a little bit more normal, I would say, where White's trying to get his knight to e4 and stabilize that position. Nice square, and of course one day after stabilizing it, he's going to try and remove it, play against the e-pawn. And black is, actively seeking for, active counterplay against predominantly the king on g1, hoping to do something over the light squares. But the first impression is it's a fairly balanced position again.
I like the way you described it. First, you're going to blockade the e-pawn, then you're going to want to win it. You want to play knight e4 and move it. And remember, Bent Larsen.
Mm-hmm.
I playing against isolated queen pawn. I was really proud of myself, patting myself on the back. And Bent came over to me and he said, "Yasser, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm blockading the isolated queen pawn." Bent said to me, "Look, you should be winning the isolated queen pawn, not trying to blockade it." And I understand. You will put your knight to e4, then you'll play f3, then you'll bring your knight f2,
exactly.
and then you go to g4, and then you win the
one,
e4.
one by one. You know?
But step by step. Okay, queen f6. Hockey mate is a big threat. Always pay attention to the checkmates. f2, f3. Rook here, takes. Step 1. We've got our knight blockading. King h2, just making sure there's no rook takes f3 tactic.
Yeah, and just as we were going through this game, we saw Magnus actually with Anish to move. We see the camera on them right now.
Mm-hmm.
Magnus was actually standing in front of his chair, just thinking about the position instead of sitting, and it looked like a little bit funny. Just quickly, it's very common for players to stand up, but normally you either stand up or you sit, right?
Right.
So
stand up and move away.
Yeah, exactly. Would it be considered a little bit impolite to stand in front of your chair and sort of, being a little bit like above your opponent almost? You know?
Absolutely. It was considered poor manners to do that because the impression the spectators has is of the simultaneous grandmaster giving the simultaneous to the young boy, and Viktor Korchnoi got furious. There was a match that he played in Belgrade, a candidates match against Boris Spassky. It was very, very tense, high drama affair. And what had happened was that the players actually had this really beautiful room for themselves. Refreshments and some drinks and stuff. But they also had the monitors of the game so that the players, if they were pouring themselves a coffee, could see it was their turn to move.
Right.
Well, Spassky liked his refreshment area so much that he just installed himself there, had his coffee, watched the monitor, and when it was his move, he came on stage. There would be Viktor furiously analyzing. Spassky didn't sit down. He just wrote down his move while standing up, and then made another move, and then left the stage.
And went back to the refreshment.
And Korchnoi, big furious argument, complained that he felt that his opponent was giving the impression that he was giving a simultaneous. And well, let's say they clashed.
It's happening again right now. So
that's exactly what you shouldn't do.
I feel that this is poor manners.
Rude.
Really poor manners here.
Yeah.
So
and he moves away, and that's fine. Also, one of the things that you should never do, I think it's also very poor manners, and some reason somebody in some book wrote that it was a really good idea to look at the position from your opponent's point of view. They were suggesting in the book that you go and stand behind your opponent looking from their point of view. And I hated that. Don't stand behind me. I'm afraid you might hit me upside my head.
If you're doing it, then take a few meters distance and do it very discreetly, because
from afar,
again, it's really just distracting your opponent. It's not something that you're supposed to be doing. So a little bit about chess manners and walking away from the board there. Let's go to the game we were looking at.
So Sergey has doubled up, and he has just played his last move, rook on d2 to e2, reinforcing everything, the knight on e4, and let me just unclick that, reinforcing his knight on e4, and really he's now finally ready for the knight f2, knight g4, and let me win the isolated pawn.
Yasser, I must say one thing. I think it's important to go back a few moves where I thought really that
Levon should take this opportunity to trade.
Yeah, to trade it and sort of equalize the position, because quite frankly, I don't know what he's hoping for now that Sergey has managed to block it altogether. If you take your chance and get rid of the pressure over here, maybe there is something that he was worried about.
I would trade rook.
Exactly.
I trade queens.
And I personally thought that it is you know, it really shouldn't be
Whoa.
much of a
problem. Just a second. So how would it go? After rook d5, you're going to go rook f2.
rook
are
f2.
you?
I was planning to.
Okay. So who can capture?
I mean,
fastest, huh?
perhaps you could make a waiting move, like king g3,
thank
and
you.
then claim that I have a hard time.
Right, because my goal was to play rook d5, rook e8, rook d7.
Right, but then, okay, my resource, of course, is rook f4, and we get actually into a kind of an opposite of what we just saw, where white goes to the queen side first. But at least, you know, I feel that the margins in these type of positions is normally the draw is there, and I think it may have been worth calculating this out for Levon, who, you know, at first sight here, I don't see black equalizing it by force anytime soon. And as you pointed out, knight f2, that looks like the things are getting better for white.
Exactly. Well, let's just see this again. So we're looking at the position instead of the move king h7. We're looking at bishop takes e4.
Yeah, we could play it right here, yeah.
Rook takes e4, rook takes, and you've tried king g8.
Of course, rook f4 immediately is also...
Why did we try king g8? Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping to just get my king closer, but that's not really necessary.
Yeah, it seems that somehow that actually worked out a little bit better for white.
Yeah.
That white got the extra tempo.
So rook d7.
Rook d7.
This all looks very forced. Rook e2.
You're now presumably this guy is the most important of the
yeah,
is more important than the a2 pawn. So
sure.
let's
b4.
Yeah, and we gobble.
And rook c2.
And by the way, this looks
absolutely
really
drawn.
Dead drawn.
So I must say, Yasser, I feel that a lot of peculiar choices are being made after this c4 move being missed. I just think that the whole game there's a sort of mutual understanding between these players, which is taking a very strange course today. And I don't know if it's because one of them or they both realized that something was missed, but this is a strange choice by Levon, no doubt.
Yeah, and also once more in this position, the only thing I can imagine is I can do this. King h8.
King h8 is
okay. So bishop takes. The only thing I can imagine is that Levon didn't like.
No, I can hardly imagine that this is a problem. Queen to f6, or queen to g5. I have all sorts of counterplay ideas.
Yeah.
In general, I don't even see a real threat coming from white anytime soon. I could go rook f7 if I want to be really conservative.
Or you can, if you don't want to be conservative, why not just do the same?
Yeah.
So many questions to be asked. Rook d e2, and it feels like white is ready for his knight f2, knight g4, and Levon is going to be nursing
slides
issues.
Yes. I don't know if you nursed those as well. But
let's go back to that crazy game of Luc Van Velde.
Yeah.
Because that is...
Oh, Lord, what has happened over here?
Yes, that is our question. So we reached this position.
Yeah.
And we were looking at
e4, e5.
E5. E5 was our choice. Knight b6. Hard to argue about that move either.
Rook b8.
Rook b8.
Looks forced. Yeah.
Whoa, knight c4. Okay.
And it seems to me...
my eye is just so attracted to e5.
I know, e5 is really the intuitively very attractive idea.
That's just...
It looks absolutely winning for white.
Exactly. But knight c4, queen d6... Nothing wrong with winning material.
I think Luke tricked him. I don't know how serious the trick is, but Luke went knight d3 and Wei completely missed this move. I'm 100% sure he missed this because okay, first of all, Luke only has 10 minutes on the clock, so he's in horrible shape.
And he's up from the board.
Yeah, but suddenly when we look at Wei Yi, first of all, he didn't immediately make a move, which is really the standard reaction. If you see a move like knight d3, you know what to do against it. So he missed this move.
Yes.
And his time, although very comfortably sitting at a little bit over an hour, looking at him, he's pissed off. He can't believe what just happened.
Right.
So let's take a look at this move, knight to d3.
Right.
It's, first of all, it's blocking this entire file, which allows some sort of a check to the black king. But more importantly, while it's doing so, you're attacking both e1 with a check, and d6 is suddenly under attack.
Right. So you don't have time to play a sweet move like knight c8, reclaim all your material, because queen takes e1 comes with a check.
And I must say, black being able to exchange that knight is,
a huge relief.
I don't even think we could have dreamt of that ever being possible here as black. I mean, our best scenario we found after e5 was really just, hey, you're only an exchange down.
How sweet it is.
So
you're only an exchange.
Maybe we're seeing some sort of a reversal here. We're going to let Wei Yi think about it for a little bit, but let's have a quick look. If takes...
Just a second. Takes. So let me give you a Hakasito. I don't want to see the king ending up on a sweet square like c7.
Okay,
so.
But at e8 I'm fairly happy.
Yeah, now I wish my pawn on e4 would be... I don't want to trade queens.
So let's say bishop to e6.
By the way, what's the body count again? It's
I
4 versus...
6. You only have 2 pawns. No, honestly...
I only got 2 pawns.
I think this is a total reversal, Yasser, because even now with my king on e8, I'll put my rook on c8, I'll put my rook on f8, try and even stop me from playing king f7, king g8, even though I don't think I need to do that. Honestly,
you may just be happy to sit where you are.
I think this specific position, and I think you made very logical moves. Not only is it the best position for Luke, I think black is simply much better over here.
Only 2 pawns, and they're not the most beautiful of pawns, by the way. A2, C2. Put my pawn on A5 or F4. I mean, I'm just saying. This move knight D3 was a huge shock, and the Chinese grandmaster sitting there saying, "I had him dead to rights. Why did I allow this?"
I think
opportunity is
what I think that Wei is going to play is c takes d3, and the reason is that as active as queen takes d3 looks, it really doesn't do much. Whereas now you could say, okay, the king is in the center. I got my d, my e, and my f pawn to storm forwards, and at least I might get some compensation from this.
For the light squared bishop.
Yeah. Now, if I look at this position, I find it a lot more unclear. And referring back to the time situation, Wei Yi up 50 minutes almost in time. Then this suddenly doesn't look like such a bad scenario anymore for white. So I think this is the moment where he has to be very practical and say, okay, I lost control, but let's make it difficult for my opponent and let's not lose my time advantage with this blunder.
Yeah, I think this compensation is good enough, but boy, there had to be so many winning lines before.
Oh, for sure.
Missing e5, e4, e5 is, but quite a shocking move. Knight c5, d3. Kudos to Luke and he's played queen takes d3.
Okay.
Well, I
don't like this move.
No, and Luke very happily getting rid of this knight. Maybe I had to play something simpler. Maybe your king on f7 isn't king on c7. Pardon me. Maybe it's not the greatest. Bishop d4 instead of my poor choice of bishop b6 check.
Yeah, I would be inclined to just play something like bishop to e6 and give up my g pawn, but maybe that's too enthusiastic.
No, I'm not going to take it. I'm gonna try to.
Okay, I see. Like now you have a threat like bishop e5.
Oh my goodness, he traded queens.
Oh, we're missing a big tactic over here.
I'm sorry.
We're missing a big tactic.
What happened?
Of course. Queen takes d6, bishop takes d6, rook a d1. He's not too concerned about his prospects at all.
I see it as well, suddenly. Thank you. Thump.
Yeah, that's the one we missed. But
bishops
I
and
will
Balthazar.
stick to my initial response, which I don't think this was planned by Wei Yi. This is the position they're almost inevitably going to get.
Bishops of opposite color.
Yeah, and 2 pawns up. I mean, honestly, okay, you probably have to. Well, actually, it's not that straightforward what black should do. I was going to suggest immediately, rook to g8. You have to hold on to that pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Probably that is what you
I'm
should be
going to
going
hang on to my pawn
Yeah.
too. I'm very happy.
It would
2
be
pawns.
2 pawns is a lot. 2 pawns is a lot, and also I don't have access to the d file once white goes rook d1. For example, if I play a move like g5 or g6, white will play rook to d1, which is just very annoying.
So it's like 2 pawns and
Yeah.
the compensation.
Exactly.
The compensation is actually on white side of the board. Oh, that's a pity. That knight d3 deserved a better fate. You play a nice move like knight d3 to get in and then 2 pawns down. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
this definitely
I got
is
a little overexcited there because I also felt that Wei Yi looked very disappointed, which maybe he is anyway with this continuation, but quite honestly, his winning chances still look great. So
exactly,
not much of a blunder at all there. Just a bit of a hiccup maybe, but that's about all it is.
Well, there we go. And he spotted the skewer. He spotted the tactic. Let's just go back to the game of Anish Giri for a moment, because lots of things have happened. Funnily enough, the position looks similar to. Whoa. There was a knight on f5. How did we get this?
I think something very funny happened here. I think the moves have been changed.
I think we were looking at the wrong position.
Yeah,
but I don't know how we did it. I think we got to this point,
and
then
knight f5.
I went knight f5.
Okay.
And then this is where we were analyzing the move c4, c5, and coming to the conclusions. White is having a lot of fun.
Right. Knight c6 probably a better square after having seen some of the lines we looked at. At least it controls the e5 square.
Right. Importantly, the knight is doing double duty, and by the way, boldly pointing out the obvious. The knight is certainly superior on the c6 square. Knight e5. Magnus found that knight on c6 to be more than annoying.
Yeah, and of course he must have considered the move bishop to b5 as well, instead of knight to e5. And maybe also then Anish had in mind to just play knight e7.
The same as in the game, just maintaining this knight and keeping the counter alive, counter chances alive.
And black could improve his position still, so that's a good sign for him. f6, king f7.
Exactly. So we got in this position and f6.
Okay, so black is actively trying to just go for some exchanges.
And this was actually a very good book. It was by John Watson. It was this strategical book. I loved it a lot. And John was explaining that in the bishop versus knight contest, it was very important for the side with the knight to accelerate the play. In other words, if your opponent has the 2 bishops, you can't just sit back and let the 2 bishops do its thing all the way throughout the whole game. You'll get killed, as did Jeffrey Zhang against Eric Hansen.
Yeah.
That you're sitting there with the knight versus the bishop, you have to accelerate. You have to force the play, because long term, winning the minor exchange is too good. So this active defense. So in this position, some players might get the impression, okay, I should just simply, keep the position, like this. Instead, f6, and what Anish did was breaking up the team right away with f6 and e5, and that's would be a strategy that John Watson would wholeheartedly recommended. Now, having said that, I like still the white's position. He's got the most dangerous pass pawn in the position, this c pawn, and as we would say, pass pawns must be pushed.
Yeah.
Just put it right there. Go c6 and Anish is still going to have issues.
Okay, how about rook to d6 here? I don't feel that
Rook
worried about black's
D6,
position anymore.
okay.
Knight takes c6.
Really?
Rook c5, knight d4. I thought that, the first thing I want to try is get rid of it straight away.
Wow.
But yeah, I do agree that
that's bold.
I would have liked it if my pawn structure was a little bit more.
Check and rook c5.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you sacrifice the exchange
no, you're
nicely.
not going to. Yes, I'm going to have a passive version after bishop d5. That's true.
Right.
Okay, so I can't get rid of it immediately.
Right.
But my e5 pawn's hanging. So.
Yes.
Any recommendations?
Yeah. Which side am I playing? No.
Perhaps
no.
rook d6 was just not.
By the way, c6 as touted. Oh, we have a tweet from Steve. Given Carlsen will probably play like Fischer, but will Gary defend like Taimanov? 6-0. And actually, he
respond to the previous tweet he sent.
I see.
Yeah, so the question is Giri going to defend better than Taimanov? That's really the... Well, Carlsen has been compared to Fischer on many occasions, I do think. I've never heard the comparison Taimanov-Giri,
That's
so
kind of a
that's maybe for you to
yeah.
judge better than I can. Yasser.
No, he's your countryman. By the way, knight f5, the more active choice than rook d6, was played by Anish. Does this cure all of his ills? No, it doesn't. Still, this move, rook c5, looks rather awkward to me. Now, okay, you put your knight here. Is there some trickies that I'm not quite visualizing? Knight e2?
Not really.
You know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Thanks to the FL. No. Rook c5.
So rook c5 is your move.
Now, if you're king, before the move king knight f7, I was going to make the suggestion that maybe we want to bring our king up, but then I thought that, okay, even if we manage to achieve it over here, this rook could annoy. Yeah. So I didn't have a very good suggestion, so knight f5, and now we're looking at rook c5, and we think Anish is still under a great deal of pressure. This just looks, well, white's rooks are more active.
Yeah.
This rook on c7 makes a poor impression. Excellent pass pawn on c6, and just a very good bishop. The old school Ulf Andersson. Oh, no, you can't do this. You can't do this. You can't play like this. This is suffering.
Yeah. I've analyzed with Ulf before, and he still says that. No, this is suffering. Ulf is a great player.
A man who really, really loved his chess. One of the things I didn't realize about Ulf, he had become at one time in his career the third highest rated player in the world. But I didn't know that he also loved correspondence chess.
Did he?
Yes, and he's played in many correspondence games. And when he wasn't analyzing or playing in, top level events, he was looking at his correspondence games. And he once showed me a position where Robin, it's like hair on my arm stand out. He gave me the goose pimples. He had analyzed a middle game position to such depths. It was like a career in one game. It was like, oh my God, how much he studied this. Yeah, correspondence chess is a completely different animal.
But back then, correspondence chess wasn't so heavily influenced by the computer.
Exactly.
So I imagine it was more beneficial to your normal chess as well, because really what you're just doing is analyzing the normal chess game.
Exactly.
Doing it all yourself.
Right.
So that was not such a... Because nowadays... top players really they can't play correspondence chess. The ones with the computer help, because it has become such a time-intensive process where it's really the human helping the machine find the best
guiding,
moves.
guiding the machine.
And that's not necessarily good for your own understanding of practical chess, to say the least. So.
Well, one of the things that, in that particular case with Ulf, that really stood out for me is how he had, to what extent he had challenged himself to continually, at a certain moment you stop. You go, okay, I like this position. No, that wasn't good enough. I mean, he really carried it out to the nth degree. Really impressive stuff. Poor Anish, he's going to have a hard afternoon in front of him. He's still got a lot of defending to go on. Let's take a look at Wesley So Pavel. We were back here. It wasn't so long ago.
And in the meantime,
Queen G4. We have
a good friend of both of ours, I think.
A shout out to Fabi. Hi.
Shout out to Fab. He's saying, is Luki escaping to a possibly defensible ending? After 12 moves, it looked like he might not survive to see move 20, and that's exactly what we thought.
We did.
Shout
out to Fabi. You're right. That was our impression too.
We thought that Wei Yi had really blundered there, but it turned out to still be a much better ending.
Right.
But if we quickly, let's see if anything has happened in that game, make sure that we're on one
accord. This is where we have kind of left it. This remarkable nut move, knight d3. We're thinking to ourselves, it deserved a better fate than what it's about to see. If we go back to this position, after the move knight c5, we thought toast.
Yeah.
This was just horrible.
And 90
minutes.
Just a horrible outlook, right?
Yeah,
and
horrible.
then specifically, it was this e5 move, which up to this point, we still don't know why Wei Yi hasn't played e5 instead of knight b6, or your suggestion of knight b6, rook b8, and then e5, which maybe was even stronger in some way because it immediately threatens knight c4 as well.
Right.
Or e5 here still looks very tempting.
Well, it looks pathetic. It looks like Black's king is on the open freeway, like just, and cars are rushing at it 100 miles an hour. Now, this looks like it was
and if we're going to like how it played out with this knight d3 resource, and then unfortunately we were not paying attention. This was a nice trick by Wei Yi to keep a big material advantage, but Luki played it very precise. Again, there is a reason that these guys are playing in the A group. King e6, of course, is a very nice move because we were playing the automatic King c6, allowing and bishop e5 was like a really dominant piece that made the advantage for white a lot clearer. Now, as Fabi was saying, rook to c8 is coming. The king is placed better. The bishop on b8 is not feeling too comfortable, and I fully understand now why Fabiano was saying perhaps this is defendable because look definitely improved on what we thought it was going to be.
Well, also the move rook c1 is an indication that it's not just two pawns anymore. It's like the some compensation when you force a move like rook c1.
Yeah.
Rook c4, f3, rook. He's winning one back.
It looks like he's going to just force.
Tricky move by the Chinese player c3. And let me just update my position. c3, inviting rook takes c3, bishop d4. And white is happy to trade his weak c pawn for this very good bishop g7 pawn.
Yeah. So what has happened? b5, a3, putting another pawn in dark squares. I must say, Yasser, this c3 move, this was very important for white. Otherwise, he would have lost the pawn back, and the rook would have stayed very active.
And Fabi's tweet would have been right on the mark. Yeah.
But now, especially, the most important thing after having played a3, I was thinking that putting the bishop on c6 when the pawn was still on c2 was going to be a construction which pretty much forever would tie these pawns on e4, f3, to these squares, or they'd have to advance over the dark squares, which is not desirable.
Right.
Now, with this bishop coming to d4, let's say bishop to c6, bishop to d4, moving the pawn, and the king coming into e3, it plays itself really.
Right, then I can
g4,
and,
f4,
and
f5.
go. Yeah.
And suddenly I'm very worried for Luke again.
Right. So c3, good move, b5, a3. What do we have? Oh, sorry, I'm going to update my board. Sorry, there we go. Clicked it.
And a5 was played. That's a move I like at first glance because at least it's trying to prevent, I guess, bishop d4 by playing b4. But of course, one question is, what if bishop to b6, for example?
Yes, that's a very good question, actually. To our audience, is it in black's interest to trade off all the queenside pawns and get 4 versus 2 on one side, or is it in white's interest? I mean, because especially at this moment, you could play the move a5, a4, or you could play the move b5, b4,
Yeah.
trying to swap everybody off on the queen side.
Well, the one problem is, of course, that there's still rooks on the board.
Right.
If there were no rooks on the board, it would have been clear cut. You try to change as many pawns as possible.
That's the rule of thumb.
The problem is that I just don't think you can salvage 4 against 2 when it's with rooks on the board, but you probably would know better than I do. My first impression is that becomes very hard.
Yeah, well, it's nice that some of the old school wisdom still applies. I still know how to win king and rook versus king. That part hasn't changed. The rest of the game seems to have changed, but also this one, that the defender in general, when is trying to trade as many pawns off the board. But as you say, with the rooks on, probably it's dead.
Yeah.
And he
this has actually been
played a rook a4, Luke doing his best to make white's life as difficult as possible.
But also bishop to d4 has been played, and again that just looks like a very precise move by Wei Yi.
Because he can meet b4
with c takes.
Yeah, and then the nice part about this very lovely move, bishop d1, and you should always remember those things. Don't leave your pieces hanging.
No, don't do it.
Protect your pieces. It's a good idea. Bishop d4 so that we can meet b4 with trading everything thanks to the rook being defended. And that seals the deal in terms of big advantage. Okay, let's just try the one last.
I think he has played g6 actually.
Yeah.
And now king f2 is expected.
Right.
And is he going to play king f2 or is he going to play g4 first? I would actually...
You mean king e3?
No, in this position...
Oh, sorry.
Because you kind of want to put up this h5 structure.
Yes, I did.
So I was thinking maybe I'll even play g4 first, because then if you play h5, I'm secure that there will still be h-pawns, which favors me, I suppose, as white. Sort of promising that I'll have an extra set of pawns. Of course, the reason why I'm saying this is that I think I'm going to need my pawn on g4 to advance f2, f4, f4, f5, sorry. So g4
may be more precise.
Maybe more precise, who knows. G6, h5 is something that Luke would probably have to do if he gets a chance. But with rooks on Yasser,
no.
I'm not feeling
I'm not placing my wagers. Back to Magnus quickly. The last move has been knight f5. We were here, right?
Knight f5, rook a5,
rook
defending,
e5,
knight d4.
Knight d4. And so the big question is, what does Anish have as an answer for bishop e4? And I don't think he has a good answer. I think this is just world champion doing his habitual grinding.
Jeez, this went
times.
Yeah, 20 minutes for Anish, still 20 minutes up on the clock for Magnus Carlsen. And he's thinking, what's wrong with bishop e4? Yeah,
right.
Good question.
Definitely, I feel that he's in his mode, his cruise control mode. when he does get those positions that he likes, I mean, he's really kind of a black death for the players. It is impossible to withstand against him. Okay.
I have one
Suggestion?
strange suggestion. I don't think it's going to work. It looks
But?
very artificial, but I'm going to suggest king h8 here.
The computers will love you for it.
Yeah, rook takes e5, rook c e7 was my idea.
Rook c e7.
And my dream scenario
Yes.
is that you're going to take
I'll
on e7.
fall for it. I'll fall for it.
And I'm not sure you're falling for anything, but I really want to get rook e1 check, rook c1 to be able to get to that pawn from the other side of the board, and makes it a little bit easier to control that.
In the immortal words of Larry Christensen, you want to get me from behind. Fair enough. I mean, you know, in a desperate situation, you've got to look for desperate solutions. That looks creative. I'm supposing you were fearful of something other than allowing me to, that there might be something in the position.
Yeah, well, specifically, okay, imagine you were very bothered by the fact that I'm threatening maybe knight. Actually, I'm not even threatening that. It's a very computerish move. I agree, king h8, although it came from me. But I also think it's a weird move.
Right.
But the other question, which is more concrete even, is am I not simply in trouble if the bishop goes elsewhere? Probably not, because you can't. You would love to keep the attack on this pawn, but that means that you have to let go of c6 over here. So maybe there is some strange moves to at least not immediately lose a pawn, but I surely dislike
is this
rook to
annoying?
c5. Definitely one of those moves that could simply end the story.
Yeah, the problem is if you were able to get this knight, maybe.
Yeah.
But knight e6 walks into this one. Ugh.
Yes. Making it even worse. No, so even this rook takes e4, c7 just wins the game. So no, it's I must say it went downhill so quickly for Anish. I'm a little bit surprised, or he has this great plan of some sort of construction that holds it together. But for the moment, it looks like you said, Magnus Carlsen in cruise control.
Yeah.
You know, gearing towards a win.
Yeah.
Let's check on our tournament leader,
Wesley So. Yes, and by the way, he somehow, Wesley, bless his heart, somehow he's managed to finagle the win of a pawn. We were here, and I very quickly was suggesting something like rook b4 or something. The queen g4 is really an annoying one, right? You just got in your break, and then the next thing you know is that your opponent's pinned. Whoops, that was supposed to pin your knight.
Yeah, and what you definitely don't want is a queen exchange, because then your queen side would become even easier to attack, right?
Okay, just to be clear, so you don't want to play a move like queen f7 because you're saying that after swap, you're fearful that b7 is going to be
very weak,
hit until it's just over.
Yeah, of course,
looks right.
You might have to be a bit careful with e4 moves and whatnot, but the general impression is that endgames, if white has a little bit of time, that's just going to win a pawn on the queen side. So
and it was for this reason, therefore, that
very radical way of
dealing with this. So Wesley said, "Thank you very much. I'll take the pawn. Rook f5, queen h4, knight g5. A little bit of dynamic play, and as you've mentioned, e5, e4 is the disruptive move, right? Just when you're not watching, suddenly that e4, and then black's pieces actually have something going for them.
I must say, Yasser, if white does not play e4 himself, I feel that the position is a little disconnected. But then again, my biggest worry here is that is black just suddenly able to sort of shift gears and get all his pieces towards the king side, when especially my rook on b3 is sort of, stuck. It might take on b7, but if there's three pieces looking at my king on the f file, nobody really cares about the pawn on b7 anymore, right?
Right.
So
you can make do with that. Yeah. So Okay, now having said all of that, you mentioned e4. Let's have a look. See, I'm assuming
knight f3. Yeah.
Knight f3 is box, and again, you will boldly claim what is your rook doing on b3.
Not only that, I also dislike the placement of the queen on h4 somewhat, because where is it going? It doesn't have that many squares. The good thing is maybe that if I triple up, if I ever want to play rook f8 and queen f7, then you still have that queen around with queen h3. But for the moment, it's not easy to improve the positioning of that piece.
No, Brian, I'm sorry, I'm just not liking this at all.
I love
pawn grabber.
I must say, I love what Pavel has done with it, and this was kind of what I was saying, that I had this feeling that he really likes to provoke, play on the queen side, and then he's going to strike. The way he did it with h5 was a little bit beyond my imagination. I didn't expect it to happen that quickly.
Right.
But
no, this is more than compensation. This is the sudden fear.
Yes.
This
now
is the
the
fear
fear
factor. Yeah, there's a fear factor going on here. I mean, this is not comfortable for Wesley So, who has been just regal in his last few events. That game with Richard, what a turn!
What a
wow.
turn!
If he had seen c6 and queen a7,
he
or
got
even the
so
simple
close.
rook d2.
Yeah, rook d2 was a very easy one.
Also an easy. That was the human way of doing it. But Wesley, fortunate in that game. Otherwise, he's made it for himself. Well, the problem is, as you said, the queen is kind of, it is simply misplaced here on h4. You put it on a more normal square, but if I try to go there, if I go here, I walk, of course, into the discovery.
Yeah.
Oops, that is ugly.
Fortunately, your queen h5 is also a discovery. So.
Right, I walk into a different but similar discovery, and I'm not very happy about losing my queen for a rook and a knight. But I was thinking that, okay, if I want to challenge the f-file, I would like my queen on e2 when I make the challenge, right?
Sure.
Here, okay. Let me do it a different way for a second. Let me try c4.
Yeah. That's a move I like because it really tries to bring the rook in. And if you could play e4 now,
then I'm great.
Well, I mean, you're simply winning a piece, actually, right?
Well, right.
So, yeah. So e4 for black would be my first reaction, I would think.
And a very good one.
Yeah.
now I regret a lot of things about my position suddenly. Not the least of which is that it's going to be very hard to challenge that knight on g5.
What a piece, huh?
What a piece. It's just at bay, ready to strike. Queen f7, rook f8. This, again, we don't have the chess engines. We tried to think in practical terms. The clock times 24, 20 minutes.
I must
say, in practical terms, I'd rather play black.
Oh, absolutely. I think, especially considering the time that they have, I feel that black is really having a very pleasant initiative.
Right.
Surely this is harder to play for white. So far, the moves have come naturally for black.
Right.
But what was really difficult is getting here.
Yes. Okay. Let's just let's give it a shot. I'm going to go rook c3.
Okay. Let's say rook to f8.
Very well played, I must say. Rook back to c1 with. Yeah.
And now
not the grand ideas of anything, but just simply trying to trade off your active pieces.
Yeah, rook f2 I'm eyeing. You're going to play rook to f1, and then knight h3 check will be coming in.
And then I'm toast, right?
I'm not 100% sure you're toast yet.
d2 is hanging.
Yeah, but f8 and queen h8 is also revamping the position.
Well, thank you, because I just thought that I was losing a piece.
No, it actually could turn out quite badly for...
That would be remarkable.
Yeah, this probably could be some perpetual check or something. Maybe actually king f7, king g6.
Are we sure?
Yeah, so I have to check you.
Robin?
Check, king g2, and just queen f5. Queen,
yes, sorry.
Queen f5. Yeah, queen f5 is a done deal, yeah.
Right.
Queen f3 and Queen H1 mates.
Sign
Yes.
our score sheets, please. The arbiter insists.
No, I must say. Well, I was playing on the black side here. So.
Yeah. Well, I got you to switch. I mean, I wanted to have the fun too. So, what did we say? This is just it.
Yeah, Rook F2 looks like the end, if that works.
Queen takes G5.
Queen H3.
Very important.
Yeah, and it's also made on G2, unfortunately. So Knight F1 is no longer enough as a defense.
Exactly. Oh my.
Yeah, so that's how quick it can go. You're just trying to bring your pieces back to the king, but black is really marching on. It's not.
This is not funny. This has happened in a snip, snap, crackle, pop kind of fashion. What about E4?
Like, Knight F3 check. We said, right?
Yeah, and by trading, can I slip away into some kind of?
I'm gonna have to take it, I think.
On F1?
Yeah, and play Rook F8.
Simple chess. Okay, I'm going.
Queen F7, just right.
It's F1 is checkmate.
Yeah, and also if you go to the other side of the board, I mean Queen F7, it just feels like, a rook and a queen. It tends to be enough to checkmate.
Without question.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, we do have a move. We've been suffering
and
along
it looks
with
like
Wesley.
in the game of Luke, what we're seeing right now in the video, something's wrong with the clock. The players are just waiting for the arbiter to fix that up. Other than that, when we left off, it was really Luke in a pretty difficult situation there. And looking at the board, it doesn't seem to have changed all that much.
It's happening a lot with the electronic clocks. The battery malfunction, the wrong program, you're not getting the increments on one side.
Yeah, there's some
like
malfunctioning.
While I love the electronic clocks, I hated those old analog clocks where your flag was hanging, but you weren't sure. 20 seconds, 80 seconds, or 2 seconds, right? You just
could be anything.
Right, you banged away. I'll accept the problems with electronic clocks that occur over the analog, but guess what? There are issues. We do have Rook B4.
Yeah, so I was also thinking about this move, Yasser. It was one of the first moves that came to my mind, but I just didn't like my prospects after Queen to F7.
Okay.
My initial idea was Rook G4. That's definitely not a good move because I simply take on D5, and it just looks like a bad position where Black has got his pawn back. Even if you take on G5, although maybe
I can survive this.
Maybe it isn't that bad.
If this is the worst that can happen.
I actually underestimated the amount of counterplay you get against my king now.
Right.
I thought I'd just go pawn grabbing.
Yes.
Which I can do, but it does look a little dangerous.
Now,
I have to go queen to B3 now.
I've got ideas of perpetuals that, well, in that case, why don't I just do it the most directly?
Yeah, queen E7, and then also C7 is hanging,
No, here I survive.
Yeah, here you survive. So actually, that's maybe his idea, rook to G4. Then I misevaluated this. I thought, well, I mean, looking back at the other lines that we consider, this does look a lot healthier.
A lot healthier. So rook B4. What about the other? Oops, excuse me.
E4.
We had this move.
That's the most ambitious move.
Right. Well, it cuts. I must say, it's well timed.
Yeah, it's very
to cut the rook from coming across because there's knight f3 check. Now, having said that, well, by the way, I feel the rook is better on b4 for other reasons too than it was on b3. And what is this, Robin? If I do play directly?
Yeah, so rook to g4, I think, is the idea.
And this too looks compelling, doesn't it?
Even rook f2 here, like, it's not really, like, it feels dangerous at first, but really white doesn't have much going for him, and rook f2 is definitely something that you have to stop.
Exactly.
So, I'm almost forced to play rook f1, but that really doesn't look like...
Well, I'll trade and go queen f7.
Oh, you even have full access over the f file. I didn't notice that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you can't do that.
This is Wesley so in trouble. We better take our breaks now, otherwise when we come back we'll get into the time trouble phase. So now's a very good time. And by the way, e3, e4, it looked like e4 by Pavel in the position.
Okay,
also
so he
another
did
nice
go e5, e4, yes.
alternative. We're going to take a break, come back in 10, stay with us for an exciting round 7. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
Levon, yesterday's question from social media was whether any of the masters can play an instrument. Can you tell us if the answer was you, because some suggested you might be the one, and what is your relation to music?
I mean, you know, when I was little, I was in a piano class, but then I had to choose between chess and piano. So, you know, the result of it. So I still have belief that maybe I would be a good pianist if I played piano, but unfortunately I don't play any instrument, but I spend sometimes even more time listening to music than training chess.
What kind of music do you like?
Generally classical, symphonies, but everything, including rap music. So I like all kinds of music.
If I remember correctly, once you received a drum set for your birthday. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, my fiance gave me a very nice present. And since I have many friends who are drummers and also jazz musicians, and so it's still there. I practice it sometimes to great dissatisfaction of my neighbors. But other than that, I mean, I still need to practice more.
Can you comment on your shoes as well? Is it inspired by music, by dancing?
That's yet another present from Ariane. So yes, those are dancing shoes, and I like to wear them because I love to dance, and I like, you know, they put me in a good mood.
What do you do before the game? Would you prefer intense preparation till the last minute or to go for a walk on the beach?
Walk on the beach.
Go for a walk on the beach.
Walk on the beach.
Probably walking on the beach.
Definitely go for a walk on the beach. Last minute doesn't work.
Intense preparation till last minute.
I prefer to walk on the beach, but mostly it's intense preparation.
If you had to choose between getting up early every day or going to bed late, never before 4 a.m., which one would you pick?
No, get up early every day.
I would go to bed very late.
Getting up early.
I get close to 4 a.m. sometimes, so I would pick 4 a.m. for sure.
I prefer the former. You know, chess players don't really have a strict sleeping schedule, so prefer to sleep late.
At 4 a.m. I'm always up since October 3. So, but I'm going to sleep, so I would prefer to get up early.
Never go to sleep before 4 a.m. Definitely a night owl.
Would you accept to get up early every day for the rest of your life, or...
Next question, no. The other option.
Would you rather work with a second who doesn't speak any language that you understand, or to have a very slow computer?
Second who doesn't understand. Yeah, we don't have a language. I'll take that.
Chess has its own language.
Probably take the second who doesn't speak any of the language I speak.
Facial expressions, something like that. But I just can't use something slow anymore. I'm too addicted to the computers.
Half my seconds, I don't understand what they're saying.
I tend to bang my laptops if they're not working.
Would you prefer to play a chess game against Bobby Fischer or to beat Magnus Carlsen?
First one.
Win against Magnus Carlsen.
Prefer to beat Magnus.
Beat Magnus Carlsen.
Bobby Fischer.
To beat Magnus.
Beat Magnus.
Bobby Fischer, because that's not possible.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our live coverage of Round 7 from Bike on Zee. The 2017 Tata Steel Chess Tournament is almost at the halfway point. We've been watching two many exciting games, but most especially the game between Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri is on our screen, and very strange developments took place. We left it at this point.
Hold on, Jesper. Can we take a moment?
Yes.
To once again look at the video footage, and just state that again, this is weird. This is just weird. You don't really do this.
Right. That Magnus is just standing in front of the board rather than seated. Okay, now he walks away. He probably is just double checking, but as you say, he's spending more than 5 seconds, more than 10.
Like Viktor Korchnoi said, if it gives off a little bit the impression that he's playing a simul here against Anish, you know, so
and it's not a very good feeling. We left the position, however, at move 36 or so. White had just doubled his rooks against the e-pawn, and everybody wants to know the answer to that burning question. Why didn't Magnus capture the pawn?
Yeah.
What would you have imagined the outcome would have been after rook takes e5?
Actually,
rook takes e5?
No, see, I'm not sure rook takes e5 is forced. Maybe it's knight takes c6 immediately that bothered him.
Aha.
But
knight
it
takes
doesn't.
c6.
No, I think you can. Well,